Okay, I have 6 o'clock. Is it okay to begin?
I would wait a few more minutes for, how about a light roll call? I don't see Mr. Van Wagner.
You do not? I'm here.
Okay, well, how about we do I guess, Nicole, can we do a roll call to see how many people we have? And
Sure. Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Very good.
Good. Okay, Mr. DeLomo? Okay, Mr. Van Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Manel? Okay, Mr. Ashkenazi?
he probably won't be here due
Yeah.
to family obligation.
Okay, Mr. Mamie? Mr. DeGennaro?
Yes, here.
Ms. Tallarico?
Here.
Mr. Pugielli?
Here.
And Madam Chair.
Here.
So just 3 absent.
We have 7 present, so I believe
We can begin.
we can begin.
Okay, we will call the special meeting for July 28th to order. And I guess, Nicole, we can also have an official roll call now on record.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Here.
Mr. DeLomo? Mr. Manel?
Here.
Vice Chair Van Wagner? Where did he? I know he's here, but,
Sorry, I had a little audio issue. I'm here. Sorry about
okay.
that.
Mr. Ashkenazi's not, Mr. Ashkenazi? Mr. Mamie? Ms. Tallarico?
Here.
Mr. DeGennaro?
Here.
Mr. Pugielli?
Here.
And Madam Chair.
Here. Okay, and if we can stand for the salute to the flag. And I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of
the United States of
America and to the republic for which it stands,
and one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Okay. The notice requirements of the open public meeting law for this meeting have been satisfied. A copy of the notice having been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed in the office of the Township. All meetings will be video and audio taped and shown on the Township of Ocean Community Cable Channel, Channel 22 on Verizon Fios, and Channel 77 on Cablevision. This is the continued case for Seaview Corporate Park, Block 149.01, Lot 1.01, 2603 Route 66, Ocean Zone 0120. This is an application to construct and operate a facility providing assisted living, long-term care, skilled care, rehabilitation, and memory care. The construction will require several variances, including lot depth, building height, number of units, parking spaces, among others. And the attorney for the applicant is Mr. Jeffrey A. Donner. And Mr. Donner.
I am here, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I know that we have board members. Do we have to publicly certify those board members who need to, or on the record?
I think for Mr. Donner's information, of all the 7 members that are here tonight, either have attended all of the hearings on this matter and or have read the transcripts or listened to the tapes and have certified as to same.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know who. Let's find out.
They have, yes, everyone has.
Everyone has either attended or certified, and they're all qualified voters.
Correct.
The only thing, maybe before we start, Ron, you want to read the rules?
If I had rules, I would bring them out, but what rules?
You know, as to questions and timing.
That we have 5 minutes per person for commentary, which is pretty much the only rule that we have in place. Again, you know, this is a different kind of a meeting this is a special meeting. This is Mr. Donner's case. Everyone else can take their time, but as I've said before, brevity is everyone's friend when it comes to matters of zoning or planning board.
Thank you.
And I will ask, although everyone has certified, but because it's been a couple of months, Mr. Higgins, can you please just provide a brief summary? And you're muted.
The application involves a 4-story building that's constructed approximately 30 feet above the Cedar Village Boulevard elevation, and they're going to be removing a substantial amount of fill from the property in order to get the site down to that level. It's going to be a multifaceted project involving various forms of assisted living, rehabilitation, dementia care, and I think nursing home facilities also. I think Mr. Donner can probably clarify that. It's been quite a while since we've actually had a hearing on this, and I'm trying to remember exactly everything that was involved too.
Okay.
But it's basically, it's a use variance, it's a D1 use variance, and there are a number of bulk variances that are associated with it that the board should look at and consider. But generally, when you have a use variance such as this, the bulk variances, while the board should look at them, they're not granted as separate variances. They're subsumed within the D1 variance, and it's all one project and one D1 variance.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Donner, I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it greatly. Tonight, we'll be presenting 4 witnesses. Mr. Besh, who's going to be talking about our temporary alternate construction access with final engineering. He will be followed by Dr. Francis, who will confirm the current position of our construction access as being still qualified to get the general permit from the DEP for disturbance of wetlands under 1 acre. Mr. or Dr. Francis will be followed by Mr. Phil Scala, who's our operations expert. And I think that the board should find this very interesting, the public as well. We're putting some meat on the bones now. Up to now, it's been just what kind of facility we're going to have and how it's going to be engineered. Tonight, we're going to get into what are the services that we really are going to be providing to the people that use this facility and why it's so important. And then lastly, we have Barbara Allen, our professional planner, who is from Beacon Planning, who will give the testimony to justify the use variance and other variances that we seek. So if I may begin at this point, I would call Mr. Besh, Dave Besh.
I'm here.
Okay, it's musical chairs on my on my screen, but I did hear your voice. Mr. Besh, there you go. Okay, thank you for waving. I appreciate that. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay, and you have testified before this board, so we will continue to accept your credentials. So if you can begin.
Thank you very
Madam
much.
Chair. Thank you. Mr. Besh, we have just prior to this meeting made a submission of certain additional plans regarding our temporary construction access. Could you delineate what those submissions are?
Sure. Amy or Nicole, would I be able to share screen?
There you go.
Thank you. Okay. What I've brought up on the screen is one of the 2 sets of drawings that were recently resubmitted in for the board's consideration. The one that I'm showing now, I'm not sure what exhibit number we're up to at this point in time.
We mark it as the A exhibit next in order. Do we have that, Amy or Nicole?
Let's see if I have notes. I had a 12, 13, 17. My last exhibit is A17.
Mine is A17 also, the
So this would
rooftop
be-
screens.
Right, so this would be A18.
Okay.
Very good.
What is it? Okay, so A18 is the temporary construction
access plan prepared by Nelson Engineering Associates. It is dated July 14th, 2022. Now, the board members may recall that we had submitted a prior plan that was designed somewhat different than this. That plan showed an access a little bit further to the west. Can you track my my pink cursor?
Yes.
Okay, where I'm placing the cursor now is approximately where the prior temporary access was placed at the then narrowest portion of the freshwater wetlands area associated with the property adjacent to Route 66. From Route 66, it went across the narrow span and then essentially straight north up to the proposed entrance, permanent entrance driveway that would come up and service the property. Since that meeting, the applicant has retained the services of the Catalyst Group, the environmental consultant, you mentioned Dr. Francis, who is in attendance tonight, to perform a wetland delineation in the field. So Nelson Engineering Associates sent our survey crews out, located those wetland flag points, and noticed that the area that we had originally designed for, although it was still the narrowest crossing, it wasn't the only alternative for crossing of the wetlands. So we looked at the overall picture of the site and found that we could address a number of different issues by adjusting the location of the driveway, the temporary driveway. So we looked at relocating that temporary driveway about 50 feet further to the east, which is what's depicted here on A18. The driveway, the tangent between the curve of our driveway, the temporary driveway, and the curve of Cedar Village Boulevard, the tangent is 165 feet between where the curb stops at the one driveway and begins at the other. That 165 feet is important because from the Department of Transportation standards, the minimum separation is 100 feet. So we do exceed the minimum separation requirements. And again, this is just for a temporary driveway. This is not the permanent driveway. We then brought the design into the site and then elected to make a curved roadway, first swerving to the northeast and then west. What this allowed us to do was to reduce the intensity of the slope that the construction vehicles would have to traverse. In the prior solution, we had a maximum grade of approximately 14.3%, which posed some concerns from the board's engineer. This design allows the maximum grade on the inside edge of the proposed roadway to be a maximum grade of 10%. Just as a reference, that's only 1.7% greater than a barrier-free ramp. The side slopes for the excavation are 2-to-1, which can be easily stabilized and will be submitted to the Soil Conservation District for certification. And it also allows us to gain easier access to what I know as the lower detention basin. The board members may recall that our drainage system relied on multiple underground detention basins. The main one was up at the top of the hill underneath the parking lot. But in order to control the permanent driveway, we had a lower detention basin, which needs to be excavated. So by placing the temporary construction driveway where we have shown it, we now gain access to that lower detention basin, which would allow for an easier excavation and installation of that lower basin. Again, as I mentioned, we had consulted with the Catalyst Group regarding the environmental concerns of the crossing. We consulted with McDonough and Ray, the traffic consultant, to make sure that we were not asking for any deviations from the DOT standards and requirements. And we also got additional plans from Menlo Engineering, who are the specialists with regard to, and now I'm referring to their plans, which I guess would then become A19.
Okay.
And they are dated July 12th, 2022. So what these plans do are provide the specific details required by the New Jersey Department of Transportation for that temporary driveway with regard to the shoulder reconstruction, the curb opening for the driveway, the guardrail placement, the separation distance from Cedar Village Boulevard to our driveway, as well as the maintenance of traffic plans that will be necessary during the course of the construction of the project.
Dave, could you just delineate for us what the slopes are throughout the traverse of the alternate construction access? You talked about the maximum ones. I think it's important for the board to understand how little this is sloped in certain areas.
Okay, the first 25 feet from the curb line of Route 66 has a maximum grade of 4%, which is 1 foot raise in 25 feet. And that falls within the pale green area adjacent to Route 66. The remainder of the pale green area, which is the porous pavement portion of the temporary roadway, that maximum grade is 5%. So it's only the northern half, which has a maximum grade of 10%. Now, what we've also highlighted.
Try calling me.
I'm sorry,
Okay,
if we
hold on
can-
one second.
Call her back.
Mr. Spire?
Mr. Spire,
Yes,
can you please mute?
sorry, yes.
Okay, what we've highlighted in blue is the area of impact of the freshwater wetlands for the crossing, which notes that the total area of disturbance of the wetlands itself is just under 2,000 square feet. And Dr. Francis will expand upon that as to how that complies with the DEP general permit requirements for this application.
Dave, can you slide that a little over? We can't see it. The pictures, thank you.
So just as references for what I'm running the cursor over is the location of the Cedar Village Boulevard intersection and traffic light with Route 66. The lot immediately to the upper left is the billboard property. There's a public right-of-way. Its origin and name is unknown. And then as we move further to the west is the location of the temporary access driveway. And it's located also right at the, shall we say, the base of the steeper section of Route 66 as you go west toward Asbury Avenue.
Now, Mr. Besh, this ultimately has to adhere to standards of the Department of Transportation, correct?
Yes, this brings in 2 additional reviewing agencies into this project's purview, is the NJDEP for not only the letter of interpretation, transitionary averaging, but also the general permit for the temporary crossing. And I keep reiterating that it is a temporary crossing, that once the project is ready to be completed, the temporary roadway will be removed and vegetation reestablished through the area of disturbance.
Okay. Now, prior to our design and proposed installation of this temporary construction access, we were relying upon Freehold Road for our construction access. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay. Are we any longer relying on Freehold Road for any construction access or excavation access?
Construction access, no. There are a couple of, shall we say, installations that we had discussed that will come in from Freehold Road. One is a water main loop. Another is a sanitary sewer main. Number one, gravity system serving those residents that are currently reside along Freehold Road. And we actually will be having an emergency vehicle alternative access. Now, I bring that up, and I thank you for reminding me that an interested neighbor had asked me a question about whether or not Freehold Road would be used for emergency access. And I had mistakenly said, no, it would not. But again, yes, because a project of this size really would be better served having a second point of access, even though it's only for emergency basis, and it would probably be what we refer to as like grasscrete. There's basically an open form concrete masonry unit that grass can grow up through the cells. So it would not be visible as a paved road, but it would be available to emergency vehicles in the event that the driveway connection to Cedar Village Boulevard was rendered inactive.
Okay, and I want to be very clear, that would be the only time that emergency secondary access on Freehold Road would be used. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there any other detail that I've admitted to ask you about that you want to bring out on this particular construction access, Mr. Besh?
I think that aspect we've covered, yes.
Okay. All right. I think I've completed my questions of Mr. Besh. I will make them available for any questions by the board, Madam Chair.
Okay. Excuse me. Are there board members with questions? Okay, I'm not seeing or.
Madam Chair, I've got one quick one, maybe
Yes.
two actually. Mr. Best, just for a frame of reference, and I'm not one to speak about, say, leave it to DOT to talk about, proper angles and stuff like that, but what is the slope of your standard driveway? What's like the ideal? Is there an ideal slope of a driveway? Just so I could get the understanding of how steep we're talking about when we say 4%.
Well, the maximum grade of a driveway, the area that you park your car, the maximum grade on that is 6%. Now, again, just as a reminder, that a barrier-free ramp that complies with the Americans with Disability Act, the maximum grade on that is 8.3%. And that's for non-motorized traverse.
Right.
So, yeah, we're very comfortable with a maximum grade of 10%. At the extreme point, which is, again, the inside edge of the curve, if we were to follow along the center line of the roadway, it'll become even less than that, closer to the 8.3% of a barrier-free ramp.
Okay. And then, Mr. Besh, I don't know if this is for you or for Mr. Donner, but let's say something else is going to be built at this site and you did not have to come before the board. Some kind of alternative like this probably would never need to come up, right? If there was something that you didn't need approval for, Freehold Road is there for you to use, and that's probably the route you would use for any other construction. What I'm getting at is you're doing this really to help to address people's concerns because you're in the situation, right?
That's correct.
Something else you wouldn't need to.
Another applicant with a totally conforming application would not need board approval to gain access from Freehold Road.
And in fact, Mr. Best, just to build on what Mr. Fuller asked, prior to Mr. Gazarovski being engaged to represent Nobility Crest, did we have an opportunity to meet with the board of Nobility Crest?
Yeah, actually, we met with representatives of both homeowners associations, Cedar Village, as well as Nobility Crest. And that's sort of the interactions of trying to accommodate the concerns of both is what brought about this solution. First, Cedar Village being interested in construction activities not entering off of Cedar Village Boulevard. And of course, then Nobility Crest being interested in that construction activities would not take access from Freehold Road. So considering the location of those roadways, the location of the freshwater wetlands on the subject property along Route 66 for a good portion of its frontage. That basically left this location and alternative as the only real viable method of gaining construction access to the property.
And this method was devised specifically to meet the concerns of the Nobility Crest homeowners, especially in the closest three buildings to Freehold Road. Is that your understanding?
That was my understanding, yes.
I have no further questions of Mr. Besh at this point. Board members have further questions.
Are there any other board members with questions?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
So, and maybe this was addressed before. So during the construction phase of the temporary access road, and obviously during the construction phase, the permanent construction phase up on top of the hill, where are you storing material and construction vehicles?
Well, the construction of the temporary road is going to be, shall we say, it is going to be a continuous and ongoing, that this is essentially going to be a somewhat finished project as it moves forward.
So all the materials for the project and the construction vehicles associated with it that might need to stay on site, where are they being stored? Is there an area outline where all that material, construction vehicles will be stored for?
We do not have a phasing yard established yet. The ideal location is, once the temporary road is set in place, to stage up at the top of the hill as we're removing the fill material from the top.
All right, and then during the construction of the temporary roadway, you're leaving construction vehicles anywhere, material?
Again, we're not proposing to leave any material, because clearly we will be constrained by the approved plan. So if the excavator and contractor who accepts the job will have to understand that they may have to mobilize materials and equipment on a daily basis from elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a follow-up on that if I could.
Yes.
So, Mr. Besh, I understand your response with respect to material, but the fill that's going to be excavated, I imagine that's going to be maintained on site because it's going to be reused on the site. I mean, I've seen that on other sites, but I certainly am not an engineer or construction expert. But is that the case, that the fill that's removed for the initial excavation will be stored there for reuse?
Well, this road, the sequence, the first thing that's going to occur is the vegetation removal along the route. So during that phase, we're not anticipating to bring in any fill material except at the point of crossing of the drainage ditch, remove the vegetation, lay the 36-inch diameter pipe into the drainage channel, bring in the stone and fill material over top of that pipe, and then continue the clearing and stone placement as we move up the hill.
I understand. So I understand you're responding simply to the phase of establishing the temporary road. I mean, when we get in, and if I'm asking a question that's not for now, let me know, but I meant when we're looking at constructing the facility.
I guess I still don't understand the question.
Well, and so when we're one of the things we're going to be doing here is changing the grade here, right?
Yes.
So when that fill, in order to do, when you excavate for construction of the facility, that fill that is taken out, I thought is maintained on site typically because it's reused for grading out the final grading of the site. Is that right?
Typically, but in this instance where we have to remove so much fill, there's not really going to be any storage of material, of fill material on site. It's really just going to be a removal process.
Okay, so there won't be mounds of fill sitting out that could have runoff, et cetera, during construction of whatever phase that involves?
Well, the disturbance alone would make the soil susceptible to erosion in the case of a rain event. But that's the reason why we prepared and will have to submit to the Soil Conservation District. So silt fences and filters and other features are part and parcel of the infrastructure to be installed during the construction phase.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and just a follow up to that. So Mr. Best, you said you have to submit that. That has not been submitted.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions from board members?
Madam Chair, I have a question, if that's all right.
Yes.
Mr. Besh, you talked about the at Freehold Road, using that as an emergency access at the end of the project, just to be used for emergencies. If I look at the grading plan for that that area, there's a pretty significant slope change, or a difference in elevation from the top of Freehold Road to where the parking lot is. You're talking about 135 elevation, where that home, the last home, is down to about 109, and it looks like you've got a 3-to-1 slope there right outside the parking lot. So is that intended to be modified and have like a grass paver access at a reasonable slope from the parking lot up to Freehold Road?
Yes, we will be looking to change the grading to
Okay.
accommodate, so the proposed contours would be extended back up the right of way of Freehold Road to provide a slope to those grass pavers, grasscrete pavers, in accordance with the direction of the fire official as to what they would like to be a quote unquote safe alternative access for their vehicles.
Okay. And does that result in additional disturbance, tree clearing that needs to be taken into account for plantings?
Yes, it will. The width of the driveway, the access driveway itself, will be 20 feet wide, as my understanding is the minimum requirement for a fire access roadway. I believe the right of way of Freehold Road is 40 feet. So a 20-foot wide roadway with 10 foot of additional right of way on each side of the vehicle path would allow us to provide for the necessary grading, and it may involve some retaining elements to provide that safe slope down from Freehold Road to the subject property.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a question with that, because Ben and I were on the same wavelength there. If that is done, then it looks to me like we're going to have at least a 40-foot wide area where the existing vegetation is going to be removed, and there is going to be some visual impact. Is that correct?
The visual impact, I think, would be from that residence that's closest. I believe there's going to be substantial vegetation remaining that would significantly impair or block the visibility from the properties to the north and west to look down that corridor. So I really think the visual impact would actually be only from lot 10.
Yeah, I think that's something we'd have to look at. We'd have to see the design and see where those buildings are, and see if what was suggested as being the screen from those buildings actually will still exist.
Another alternative that could be investigated, and I'm shooting from the hip on this one, is rather than bringing the driveway just straight down the right of way of Freehold Road, bring it into the site again, like in a curved pattern, like we did for the temporary access drive, but come through so you have greater length and the greater ability to soften the slope, and also to provide clusters of vegetation on both sides of the access road to block the screen line, the sight lines.
Yeah, it's something I think that the board and the board's professionals need to look at. Because we don't have a design for it at all yet.
Understood.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, thank you. Mr. Donner, are you there?
Yes, normally we would open Mr. Best.
Oh, I'm
but-
sorry.
I think at the different hearings, Mr. Gazarovski is asked to hold all of his questions till the end of all the applicant's witnesses. Is that correct?
Well, he did that evening, but I think it's a better plan if we do it that way, so we have continuity with our case, and then he can ask the questions.
Yeah, is that correct,
He feels are
Mr.
important.
Gazarovski, is he here?
That is correct. I think I made that request in the very beginning, and I think it'll allow my colleague, Mr. Donner, to move forward pretty quickly.
Yeah, there may be some questions from the public that, other than those represented by Mr. Gazarovski, that may be
I have a
requested.
question.
Mr. Falvo, I believe, is
At this time,
also,
we will,
Yeah. Mr.
I'm
Bash,
sorry.
I don't know whether Mr. Falvo,
Yes,
my
I'd
colleague,
like-
whether he has any questions.
I have some questions, please.
Can I ask in what capacity Mr. Falvo is asking the questions?
I'm asking questions as a homeowner at Cedar Village Boulevard.
Questions for Mr. Besh.
Right.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry, I was moving on and I
Wait,
thought
wait,
that
wait.
after the board, we do
Okay.
take questions from the,
Mark, we were going to wait until the end for all of the public. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
No, I
Okay.
believe,
Representing myself.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. Gazarovski asked that all of his questions would be held until Mr. Donner's case was fully presented. But I think we had opened up questioning of witnesses to other people throughout the proceedings. And somebody remind me if I'm wrong.
You're right, Mark.
Okay.
but it was
Steinberg-
only for the witness that's, that
Yes.
testified. Okay.
Mr.
And I
Steinberg,
only
I
answered
just-
it. Go ahead.
I just want to make a point. We have a settlement agreement with Cedar Village in which consideration has been exchanged. And as part of that settlement, the homeowners association at Cedar Village specifically agrees with and has permitted all of the work that we are proposing on our site plan. And I believe that I want to be as transparent as possible. And if there is a question that helps elucidate what we're doing, I'm happy to do that. I just don't want to see Mr. Falvo's questions turn into an objection, because I think he's bound by his own homeowners association not to do that. And I know Mr. Falvo for many years, more years than we can either one of us remember. So I certainly do not want to prohibit him from asking a good faith question, but I don't want this to become an objector force to our application, because I think in fairness, it would not be permitted under the settlement that his own homeowners association has engaged in with my client.
Madam Chair, can I ask a follow-up question on that of Mr. Donner?
Yes, sir.
So can you just describe, settlement agreement suggests to me that it resolves litigation. Do you mean that this agreement you're referring to, is it an agreement in place with the homeowners association specific to this application?
Yes, sir. There was no litigation. There
Well-
was discussion and agreement, and this is an agreement that was ratified by the board of directors of the homeowners association after what I believe was
I may want to speak, Kathy.
after what I believe is a public vote in Cedar Village, and then a vote by the board. So I have, as part and parcel of the settlement, we have those documents as well. It's an official act by the homeowners association.
Mark, I'll let you ask the question.
Yeah, no, and that is in place. That was in exchange for a formal objection by the homeowners association, which I believe probably will bind all of the homeowners in Cedar Village. There is no such agreement with the homeowners of Nobility Crest, but they are represented. I believe Mr. Gazarovski originally said 2 of the homeowners he was representing, but eventually said he's representing them all.
Representing the board, he said.
May I make a comment
Yeah.
to what we're discussing? I don't know the date of that agreement, if in fact there was such an agreement, but haven't there been significant changes to the plan that was in place back then as compared to what we're listening to now? So I don't see how Mr.
I don't want to. Yeah, but I don't want to get in.
preclude.
I don't want to get into that. Okay. What I want to get into, if there is a problem with the board of directors of Cedar Village, they'll have to come forward at some point. And what I'm trying to get to at this point, without going crazy here, is number one, you represent all of the members of Cedar Village. Strike that. All the members of Nobility Crest, the board of directors, and the homeowners association.
Yes, I
Mr.
do.
Gazarovski?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so to those parties, all your questions to this or any other witness should be directed through Mr. Gazarovski when he will be have his opportunity to cross-examine all of the witnesses. That's number one. Number two, I do not feel the board should prevent anybody who is not represented by counsel, which would be all the people of Cedar Village, to ask a fact question or a question of a witness. No objections, no statements, but I believe that they have the right to ask a question of a witness. So with that said, Mr. Falvo, just questions of this witness.
Yes, I do. Mr. Besh, with regard to your plan, how wide is this temporary construction easement?
It's not an easement. The pavement width is 30 feet.
30 feet. And you said that you're using porous pavers?
Porous pavement in the bottom half of the road and a temporary bituminous pavement with stabilized base and dense graded aggregate on the upper half of the road.
And with regard to this porous pavement portion, what is the subbase?
Open stone.
And that's going to be sufficient to handle the truck loaded with soil?
Yeah, the stone layer is going to be from the upper elevation of, I believe it's elevation 62, down to the elevation of the drainage ditch, which is approximately elevation 58. So we've got 4 feet of stone that has to be placed at the wetland crossing, which we believe is more than adequate for supporting fully loaded vehicles.
Have soil samples been taken to see if that's going to be sufficient?
Soil testing has not been done at this location yet, no.
And with regard to the first curvature as you come out of the site, where is that in proximity to the retaining walls along Cedar Village Boulevard?
Let me try and go back to the plan. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit more. And you can see this, I'm still share screen.
Yes.
Okay, the retaining wall for Cedar Village Boulevard is approximately where the cursor is I'm pointing to is now. So we should not be in, that appears to be, if the roadway is 30 feet wide, that appears to be 50 feet from the roadway to the retaining wall.
And what about the existing stabilized slope, which is grass and landscape?
Well, that area we will be traversing when we do construct our permanent driveway down to Cedar Village Boulevard.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Okay, let me go to the site plan drawings. This would have been A4, the grading and utilities plan. So again, you can see the cursor pointing to the end of the retaining walls and the roadway. Now we are proposing to construct our own retaining wall along that edge of the roadway. And we will be disturbing and excavating the grade, number one, to install the underground detention basin, as well as the roadway at the 8.3% grade that I had mentioned before. So yes, there is going to be excavation required for the installation of the roadway to Cedar Village Boulevard.
For the temporary roadway, will there also be excavation in that area?
No, not until we actually start to construct that roadway. The temporary roadway will not venture past, I believe there's actually a grading easement line
Right.
adjacent to, and we're showing our, let me zoom in a little bit more. Our proposed grading falls just short of the grading easement line from the subject property to the Cedar Village Homeowners Association.
And with the installation of the temporary detention basin, will that occur simultaneously?
You faded out. I couldn't hear the question.
When the underground detention basin is proposed, that will be constructed at the same time as temporary roadway is constructed?
Not immediately at the same time, but in accordance with the standards for soil erosion and sediment control, the installation of drainage features is one of the first components to be constructed once the site has been brought to grade.
Well, what about, I understand that the pervious installation of this road is designed to accept the rain and whatever else that may fall upon it. That will be sufficient to contain whatever drainage is going to come off this road?
Our understanding, we had run it through with our hydraulic engineers, and we're also coordinating this with the Catalyst Group, the environmental consultant. That it's my understanding that the porous pavement area is able to accept runoff from not only its own surface, but an impervious surface area up to 3 times its size. So we're only taking an additional 100% rather than 300% of flow from the bituminous section onto the porous pavement section.
All right, and the only thing containing the water on this roadway is going to be a silt fence on the sides?
We had looked at that, number one, we're flattening out the curves. We don't have a crown to this road. It is flat. But if it's felt to be necessary by either the DEP or the Soil Conservation District, we can install a rolled asphalt curb along the edge of the roadway to contain the runoff within the roadway itself.
But all of this is predicated on this design, but no soil samples or borings have been taken to see if the underlying soil is capable of handling A, the roadway, and B, the volume of traffic that's going to go over it. Is that correct?
As I said before, no soil samples have been taken in this area.
And just refresh my recollection of that of the board. How many truckloads are you estimating that it will take to bring this site down to the grade that you require?
I don't recall a specific number of truckloads. I think we had estimated more of a time frame of 6 months, 3 to 6 months worth of truck traffic to bring the site down to grade. And that's to bring the site down to grade. This is for the duration of the construction of the project, which is 18 months to 2 years.
No, I understand that, but I believe at some meeting you said there were going to be 10,000 trips.
That seems a little bit high to my recollection. Again, I don't recall this specific number.
About 7,000 if it's 100,000 yards.
Thank you.
How many?
It's about 7,000 if it's 100,000 yards.
Yeah, I believe the number was closer to 150,000 yards as testified,
Oh.
Dave.
Then it is about 11,000.
Gentlemen, I don't think we're talking about that much fill being excavated. Never heard of
All right, but you're going to have a substantial number of trucks coming out and going into the site just for the removal of the soil.
Yes.
All right. And where it comes out on the highway, 66, do we know where that entrance will be with regard to where the roadway is striped to allow cars to go up Asbury Avenue?
You mean the transition lane to the third
Yeah.
lane?
Yeah.
We're well below that. The exact distance, I do not know. We are east of the two posted sign that exists on the right of way of Route 66 that identifies the transition lanes. So again, we are east of the transition. The exact distance from that transition, I do not know.
One other question. If we have a snowfall, which requires this road to be plowed, how is that going to affect the porous pavement area? Plowing,
Once the snow is removed, it would have to be evaluated for its condition.
secondly, where would that snow that's being removed be dumped?
I guess it all depends upon the equipment that's being used to remove the snow, whether it's a snow blower or whether it is a plow, because a snow blower would clearly blow the snow off to the side of the road.
And if it's a plow?
A plow, also depending upon which direction they are proceeding. A good portion of it would, with the angle of the plow, would probably go off to the side. But then at the last few feet at the bottom of the slope, like in so many commercial parking lots, the plow driver may push the last remnants of snow over into the median of Route 66.
All right, but if you plow it, that's going to demolish those silk fences on each side of the road.
Again, this is a condition that is experienced with almost every construction project, that after an altering weather event, all the soil erosion sediment control measures, as well as the condition of the temporary access measures, have to be reevaluated and repaired as necessary.
All right, and this roadway will handle trucks coming out as well as trucks going in, is that right?
Yes, it's a 30-foot wide roadway, which is equal to a municipal grade roadway width.
And that portion that comes from
Mr. Falvo, I do have to interrupt at this point because we are at the 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Madam Chairman.
Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. Besh from the
Are the
public?
residents from Nobility Crest allowed to ask questions?
If I'm not mistaken, they're represented by Mr. Gazarovski.
Represented by Mr. Gazarovski, and I think you should direct your questions through him. I'm sure you can send him an email with a list of questions.
I don't think that's a fair thing for the residents of Nobility Crest. I'm sorry.
I agree. Mr. Falvo is represented and he's not supposed to speak. And why can't we speak?
Well, I don't want to make this an argument back and forth. The answer
Well,
is
you
you all
are.
represent Mr. Falvo, and Nobility Crest is not, and Cedar Village is not represented by counsel here. They don't have a lawyer.
No, that's because they got a large payoff.
Well, I have no, but you, unfortunately or fortunately, the residents of Nobility Crest are represented by counsel. So please address all your questions through Mr. Gazarovski.
Mr. May I speak for 1 second? I am in my office. I am access to my email. My email address is GASIOROWSKI law. Once again, that's GASIOROWSKI law@gmail.com. So any questions which residents may have, if they send me the email, I will proceed to explore those areas when the conclusion of the applicant's case.
Thank you.
Okay, I see John, John Cedar Village.
Yes. John Donnell, 22 Ben Lane, Cedar Village. I
Okay,
follow up
that's your
on something Mr. Falvo mentioned. When I was looking at that temporary roadway coming in, the easternmost part of the curve looks like it comes fairly close.
Okay, just, you
The
need to
wall of-
ask, we don't want your opinion at this point. We need to, you
I'm
need to ask a
trying to
question.
put it in the form of a question, Mr. Steinberg.
Okay, yeah, to Mr. Besh.
And it looks like, I have to say that it looks like it comes close. Did anybody do a test on the stress that it might cause to the retaining wall that holds up, well, the 30 feet above Cedar Village Boulevard that Seaview Corporate Park is building on?
The temporary roadway or
Yes, the temporary roadway.
No, because as I mentioned, we're meeting the existing grade as we meet the slope easement for the retaining walls. We believe we are far enough away that we would have no impact on that retaining wall. So again, to answer your question, no testing has been done on the soil between the proposed wall and the existing retaining, proposed driveway and the existing retaining wall.
Okay, so all of these trucks that are taking it out will not cause undue pressure to cause that to sag, collapse, or whatever.
As I said, no testing has been done
No testing
in
has
that
been done.
area.
Okay. And it was still, as I understand, because there seemed to be some confusion on everybody's part, 150,000 cubic feet of dirt that had to be removed from that area. And that was before the temporary road would add to some of that.
Whatever the number was, the yardage that yes, that is correct.
Any other questions?
No, that's all I have at this point.
Okay. Do you mind to stop sharing, Mr. Besh? Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Besh from the public?
No.
Okay. Mr. Donner.
Okay, Mr. Besh, would you still stay in place because Dr. Francis may need access to the plan during his testimony?
Sure.
Thank you. I'd like to call to testify Dr. Michael Francis.
Good evening, everyone.
Mr. Francis, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Madam Chair, before Dr. Francis, did you hear what Madam Chair said about the oath of testifying truthfully?
Yes.
Okay, you said yes.
I
would just let the chair know that Dr. Francis has testified in this matter before. We have laid out his credentials. He is an expert in environmental and DEP matters and wetlands delineations and the standards and all of those things. He's been accepted by the board as an expert in those fields.
Okay, we'll continue to accept.
Thank
Please
you.
proceed.
Dr. Francis, you have seen the new location of this temporary construction access, have you not?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and you heard Mr. Besh's testimony regarding the fact that it was relocated in part based on a more recent delineation of the wetlands that you and your colleagues performed. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay. Based on what you have observed out there regarding the delineation of the wetlands in this area, can you comment on whether or not the movement of the driveway, the temporary access, has increased or lessened the amount of wetland area that would be disturbed?
Yes, well, first of all, the relocation of the temporary access road is now further away from the open water pond, which is probably a little bit more desirable. It also has there's also a very, very narrow crossing of the wetlands, which is permitted under the general permit program from the DEP. I don't recall what the exact acreage was previously, but the current area of disturbance for this road crossing is, as Mr. Besh testified to, is less than 2,000 square feet, 1949 to be exact. So this qualifies for the general permit, the freshwater wetlands general permit 10A for it's called a very minor road crossing. The crossing itself is less than 100 feet across the water course or across the wetlands and is less than a quarter acre. In fact, this 1949 square feet is less than 1/16 of an acre. So we are significantly less than the threshold that this permit allows. And along with this permit comes an automatic transition area waiver for access. Whereas, and this is codified by rule, that area of transition area to cross the wetlands, you don't count that towards the disturbance. So you only count the wetlands disturbance, which is the 1949 square feet. And you get the automatic waiver on either side for access. And again, this permit is intended for permanent crossings. So the fact that this is a temporary roadway that'll be restored following completion of the project is just a plus. This corridor will be you know, all the fills and pervious and impervious materials will be removed and vegetation restored. So again, this is a very narrow crossing, still maintains compliance with the New Jersey Freshwater Wetlands Protection Act and its implementing rules. And is again, you know, and that is if it were going to be left in place permanently. But since it's going to be removed and restored and revegetated, this is just a plus for the site.
Madam Chair, I believe that Dr. Francis has covered all the topics that I would want to ask. Well, just one last question. I think you may have already addressed it, but based on the standards as you know them, is there any doubt in your mind that we qualify for the general permit for purposes of this temporary construction access?
No, there's no doubt. And, you know, and just to further elaborate on this, not only do we meet the thresholds for the permit, which is less than a quarter acre and 100-foot crossing. And again, if it was greater than 100-foot crossing, then we'd be limited to 1/8 of an acre. But again, our total disturbance is less than 1/16. So we even meet that 1/8 of an acre threshold if we were to be pushed that far. But some of the conditions of that permit involve maintaining cross drainage, which we have a cross drain across the roadway to allow flow from either side, and a low flow fish channel. So at low flow times that wildlife was able to pass, and also that any riprap is minimized to the extent feasible, and cannot exceed 200 cubic yards of riprap unless soil erosion control, the Soil Erosion Conservation District dictates that, which I don't think we're going to be anywhere close to 200 cubic yards of riprap. And Mr. Besh can testify to that. But yes, since it meets all the conditions and thresholds of this permit, there's no doubt in my mind that this will be issued by the DEP or authorized by the DEP.
Thank you, Dr. Francis. Madam Chair, I have no further questions of Dr. Francis. Perhaps the board has some.
Okay, questions from the board?
I have a question. Is there any concern that runoff will impact the wetlands at all?
Well, runoff is going to be handled under the soil erosion and sediment control plan that Nelson Engineering is preparing. That the adequate protection measures are going to be in place prior to construction. I hope that answers that question.
Well, we caught you froze about halfway through. So.
Oh.
Would you want him to repeat that answer?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
okay.
Doctor, just repeat the answer because the computer did freeze and we missed a good part of it. Please.
Okay, can you hear me now, clear?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the New Jersey DEP also reviewed the sediment, soil erosion and sediment control plan as part of the wetlands permit application. So they will also, in addition to the Soil Erosion Conservation District, review that plan sure that the adequate measures are in place prior to construction.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up on that just quickly? Does that review also include issues of salt that would be spread during the winter times when the road gets icy?
I do not
And the
believe that
impact salt would have on the wetlands?
no, there's no analysis to that would be done or reviewed by DEP.
Okay.
Any other board members with questions? Okay, anyone from the public with questions for Dr. Francis? And
Yes, I do, Madam Chairman.
oh, just one second. I did see Jennifer Krimko's hand raised. You're muted.
Hi, Madam Chair. How are you?
Good evening.
I know it's unusual to see me when I'm not getting paid for a hearing, so it's nice to see everybody. I happen to be a partial unit owner in Nobility Crest, and I would just like to put a personal objection on the record. I believe Mr. Gazarovski represents the condominium association. I confirm that with the vice chair, Mr. Garofolo. None of the individual property owners or unit owners in Nobility Crest signed a retainer agreement. The board did. The individual unit owners are not individually represented. Only the association is. I think you're depriving the unit owners of their due process rights to cross-examine the witnesses. And I think it's a reversible error. And I would suggest that you allow the members of the community to speak. Obviously, the board members should not be allowed to ask questions because the board members in their capacity are represented, but I do not believe the individual unit owners are. So
I would object to Ms. Krimko's position. She has no authority. She's talking off the cuff. And
I'm
my
speaking,
position.
Mr. Donner, I have
Don't interrupt me,
authority as a unit
Ms.
owner.
Krimko, please.
I am a
don't interrupt me.
unit owner.
Do not interrupt me.
If
Okay,
I
did
can
not
just
interrupt you.
actually just defer to
Right.
Mr. Steinberg.
Mr. Steinberg,
to please,
we need you to come in.
I'd like to see the resolutions and the minutes and everything else that the board at Nobility Crest did to engage Mr. Gazarovski and who he represents, as well as the, I guess I have to review the bylaws and see how that works. Without all that, we maintain the position that the association is represented by council.
May I speak, please? I've listened to Ms. Krimko's comments and I agree with her. My retainer is with the board. And obviously the board, prior to signing that agreement, did not ask questions from all of the unit owners. So as an individual unit owner, it would be my position, and I agree with Ms. Krimko, which doesn't happen too often, that they should be able to ask questions. It's as simple as that. She's an interested party. She owns property, even though I'm retained by the board. Individual property owners can still ask questions, which will really lend to the veracity of the witness's testimony. It's as simple as that.
As I said, I'd like to see how the board voted, who the board is representing. The board is acting on behalf of the homeowners, number one. Number two, even as the rules of the municipal land use law specify, these individual homeowners weren't even notified because the requirement is to notify the condominium association in a high rise, which this is considered.
That's exactly the point. The individual property owners themselves were not notified. I was retained by the board.
But I'd like to see, I would like to see the resolution of the board. Was it done at a public meeting? Was everybody invited to attend? I need to know that information before I can make a ruling. And at this point, I think they should address their questions through you.
Okay, and I would just like to add one more point. The fact that we weren't individually noticed because we're not within 200 feet is not relevant to our standing to be able to ask questions or place objections on the record.
I still need to see all of the documentation, and maybe I'll supply it with me, Ms. Krimko, as to how they engaged and what the board did.
Then what I would ask, Madam Chair, is that you have Mr. Donner commit to bring all of his witnesses to the subsequent meetings.
He
So
has.
In the event the board decides that the individuals do have the opportunity to ask questions, they will be available for further cross-examination.
He has done so.
I second
because
that.
He has agreed with Mr. Gazarovski, and Mr. Gazarovski will be able to cross-examine all of his witnesses at the conclusion of his case, so they will all be available in the future.
Okay, then I just note it for the record, and I'd ask the board and the association board and Mr. Gazarovski to get you whatever's needed for you to make that decision.
Yeah, my recollection of the agreement is I represent the board and I represent them with regard to the common areas, which of course are owned by the association. I don't believe, and I would take the position that that should not preclude individual property owners.
I understand. I'd like to see.
Questions.
I'd like to see the resolution of the board and its minutes and everything else that went on in engaging you, so I can make that decision.
Well,
Mr. Steinberg,
could we agree then? Could we agree then that this meeting will not terminate without that decision being made and those documents being examined?
what do you mean the meeting will not terminate?
In other words, at conclusion
case.
of tonight's meeting, it will not be over. And if it's determined that individual unit owners have the right to ask questions, they'll
No,
be able to
there's-
have these witnesses come back and ask questions.
There's no intention on my part to close the application or to end these meetings tonight, okay? Mr. Steinberg, I would ask that whatever gets submitted to you by Mr. Gazarovski, the board, or anybody else, Ms. Krimko, that I get a copy of it and an opportunity to comment on behalf of my
Yeah.
client, the applicant,
Yeah, I don't.
before your decision is made. Thank you.
Well, could we-
Decision
could
is
we
not
also-
made. Decision is not made totally. At this point, we said we'd only listen to the questions through Mr. Gazarovski. If I see all the documentation I've asked for and I change my mind, these witnesses will be available because they're going to be available for Mr. Gazarovski. And then if I feel that the public has the right to ask questions, they certainly can.
May I make one further comment? Mr. Francis particularly has opined on numerous occasions what other boards or other agencies will do or what they will approve. All of that should be before the board, before the conclusion of this case, not just Mr. Francis's opinion as to
Okay.
what some other agency will do.
I understand.
No,
Mr.
these would all
Gazarovski,
these would all be
Yes.
resolution compliance issues.
It's not a resolution compliance issue. The board
let's
cannot
not,
make
let's not,
an
let's
intelligent
not argue it
decision
now, Mr.
without seeing
Gazarovski.
that.
You have that chance to cross-examine Mr. Francis at the conclusion of Mr. Donner's case and bring all those items up at that time.
Thank you.
I don't want to get it back and forth. I want to let Mr. Donner present his case.
Thank you, Mr.
And I thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly don't ever want to be the one to make more trouble when I'm not involved with the application to start with, but it is my mom, so,
Okay, thank you.
all right, thank you.
Are there other questions from the public for Dr. Francis?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Falbo.
yeah. Dr. Francis, you're confident that the wetlands crossing permit will be granted, but the construction of this road would still be subject to their approval, correct?
That is correct.
And with regard to the latest regulations that were adopted by the DEP, does this roadway conflict with any of that, with this construction of this road?
No, it does not. No, it does not. It requires a permit, and that permit will be applied for and secured.
That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Marvin Golden.
Excuse me. Dr. Francis, you've testified that this meets the wildlife requirements, but in previous testimony, we were told that there wasn't any wildlife in this area. And
Well,
so
What do you mean wildlife requirements?
I beg
Mr.
your pardon?
Golden, perhaps it would help if you asked your question.
To your knowledge, is there wildlife in this area?
Yes. That does not preclude, a permit from getting authorized.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the public for Dr. Francis.
Can't answer any questions, right?
Was
Is that, I'm sorry, who was just speaking? Any other questions from the public? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Mr. Donner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Francis, for testifying tonight. I'd next like to call to testify Mr. Phil Scalo, who is our operations expert regarding the facility itself.
Okay, Mr. Scalo, do you, if you can just wave, I can find you. Okay, let me just do speaker view. Mr. Scalo, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, there you go. Okay, and have you testified before this board before?
No, I have not.
Okay,
I have
can you tell
testified.
us, you can tell us briefly about your credentials, please?
Okay, Mr. Donner, you ready?
Yes, I am. In fact, if you would answer, Madam Chair, Mrs. Scalo, if you could please give us your background and your specific experience in the area of operations of facilities like the one we are proposing.
I've been involved in the post-acute and nursing home and assisted living sector for almost 37 years. I'm currently the chairman of Bartley Healthcare. We have a continuum of care in Jackson and 6 other affiliated facilities in the state of New Jersey, 2 in Michigan, 2 in Rhode Island, 2 in Maryland, and 2 in South Carolina. I've been involved in this. I'm an attorney by training and practiced law for 20 years. I've been the president and CEO of Bartley Healthcare since 1984. I recently took the title of chairman, and I'm also the vice chair of the American Healthcare Association, which is an association that represents 14,000 facilities throughout the country. I previously served as the independent owners representative on that board and as secretary treasurer. I'm also on the board of the Healthcare Association of New Jersey that represents 350 facilities, both AL and assisted living and skilled nursing in the state of New Jersey. And I'm also a member of the board of trustees of Rutgers University. I serve on the health policy committee for Rutgers.
One additional clarification, Bartley Healthcare that you talked about, is that a facility that offers long-term care, rehabilitation, and memory care?
Yes, it does. It offers a full continuum from assisted living through skilled nursing, offers rehabilitation, memory care, and palliative care, just a full range of post-acute care.
Madam Chair, unless the board has further questions regarding credentials of Mr. Scalo, I would like to present him as an expert in the operations of assisted living, long-term care, rehabilitation, and memory care facilities.
Okay, unless there's any objections, the board will
May
accept.
I ask a question, Madam Chairman, about his credentials?
It would have to be from the board, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Steinberg.
I don't have a question about his credentials, but I have a question about the relationship between
Can't
Bartley
hear
and
anybody.
this property.
Can't hear.
Perhaps there's an audio issue on your end. I can hear you, Mr. DeGennaro.
Are you going to be the manager? Is Bartley going to be the manager of the facility?
That has not been determined, and I have no financial interest in the project.
Okay, so you'll be speaking about general terms about these facilities themselves, not specifically this facility.
No, I can speak about this facility. I've been involved in the planning of the facility and have consulted regarding these type of services that would be available.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to understand the relationship between you and the facility.
Okay, so unless there are any objections from board members, we will accept the credentials. Not seeing any objections. Okay, please proceed, Mr. Donner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Scalo, I'd like you to outline for us the kinds of services that Arbor Manor is proposing to provide to the ultimate residents in that facility. And perhaps we could start with assisted living. Can you explain for us what assisted living actually is?
Yes, the facility is proposed to have a full continuum of care from assisted living through skilled nursing with memory care and rehabilitation services. Assisted living is basically what it says. It provides residents with assistance of the activities of daily living. For instance, in some cases, it may be as simple as just providing meals and supervision to a range of providing medication management and other services from that perspective. And in assisted living, it's basically people live in their own apartments. They have centralized dining, or if they want dining in their room, they can do that. There are apartments, there are cooking facilities for people, usually just microwaves from that perspective. And there's a full continuum of medical services that are available, including physician visits and monitoring all medication and other health needs. The wellness directors in assisted living facilities that would be proposed here also would be involved in basically managing the care of the residents in that facility. On the memory care side, it would be a little higher level of care, and that would be devoted to people who are suffering from Alzheimer's or other related dementia. And those units are secured units and set up in such a way, and these will be set up in such a way to allow the residents freedom of movement without, as well as protecting them from being able to wander or something like that. There's a lot of technological safeguards that are put in place, as well as programs. Excuse me? Was that a question?
No, that was
I
just
think it was
chiming
just
in.
a straight comment.
Usually what happens in that situation is it becomes a continuum where someone may come in as an assisted living resident, not need a lot of care, but as their age progresses or their condition regresses, there'll be a situation where more service would be available. And generally what happens, in assisted living, it's really like living in a full service hotel to some degree that offers medical services and medical monitoring.
Now, looking at assisted living before we go to the other types of care, can you explain how our facility is set up? You talked about units to provide beds for the residents, but there are other facilities in our project being proposed. And how do the residents interact with those facilities?
Okay, what'll happen, what'll be proposed here, and what is generally the assisted living project, is that people have their individual units, which could be 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or studio units. And then what's available for them elsewhere are areas for activities, such as a town hall type of thing where they would meet for their activities. There's usually a library, and we're proposing as a library service here with computers and that type of thing. There's also game rooms. There'll be a theater proposed in this building, so that they really be like a Main Street kind of area where they would go and have those services available to them. Dining is provided 3 meals a day in a dining room, or in, as I mentioned before, or in their room if they prefer that. There are social services available and activities. The activities can range from trips to the outside. There will be transportation available to people coming in, entertainers coming in, and other activities such as exercise classes and things like that. It'll be a full service in a sense that it'd be sort of like one of our residents many years ago described it as being like being on a cruise ship. Everything's available for you, but you're not moving anyplace.
On the physical therapy and medical supervision side, could you comment on that a bit? There is a nursing staff available, is there not?
Yes, there are. In assisted living, they'll be employed an RN, and RNs will be available basically around the clock. There'll be LPNs for administration of medication, as well as medication aides, as well as personal care aides and certified nurses aides will be available to provide the care. There will also be activities people, as well as the food service people available in that. And one of the programs that is going to be available here will be, as a resident moves in, there'll be a full analysis of their care needs, including medications, and so that the care management can be in place. Because many times what happens is residents come into a assisted living building, and we find that they have some cases as many as 20 different medications that somehow will actually counteract one another. So we do a full analysis on admission to make sure that their care is going to be managed appropriately and they're on the appropriate medication if needed.
Now, on the well-being side, is there also physical therapy available and the ability for the residents to fulfill their needs in that regard?
Yeah, well, as I said, there'll be an exercise area for them, and any resident in assisted living that needs any kind of physical therapy would be available in another location in the building. Because what's unique to this concept is that it's going to be assisted living, skilled nursing and rehabilitation, as well as memory care, all in one building on a vertical axis from that perspective. Usually they're in separate buildings, and the benefit of being in one building this way is that the travel distance people have to go is not as far to be able to get the services, but the services would be available both in the assisted living area as well as in the rehab area in this building.
I'd like you to comment on the concept of community. Are there real relationships and a real community that form within a facility like this among the residents?
Yes. It's in fact what happens in this situation is very often people do not want to move out of their homes, but because of their physical and medical needs, they must do so. And generally, what will happen is, there's a socialization, and the residents take care of themselves. I know my mom was a resident in one of our buildings for a period of time, and I would hear every day she'd tell me what's going on and who's happy and who's not. And I know I make a habit in our buildings to make sure that I'm moving around. So we, for instance, one of the services that'll be available in this building, as I recommended, would be a town hall process similar to what you would do in any town, where the residents have a residents council. They be able to communicate to management, in a meeting, and be able to fully provide, what they need. They basically run the building in the sense of what activities they want, what they want for meals, and that we all take those things into consideration for what the residents need. Our job really is to make their life easier and more rewarding, rather than in many cases residents being in an apartment or being in a house by themselves and not have any interaction with their neighbors. So in this situation, the residents do interact and really take care of one another.
Is it also the goal within assisted living to enable these residents in assisted living to be as independent as they can be?
Well, that's the whole purpose. And in a sense, what happens is, in many cases, the safety measures that are built into the building, including the technical stuff, call bells and monitoring that's done that way, enables them to be as active as possible. In fact, what is encouraged in assisted living is for residents to be active. That concept of if you don't use it, you lose it, is very prominent in what we've done in our buildings, and we encourage people to be as active as possible. And I know how important it is as I age myself. The exercise that I've done for many years, it's getting harder to do, but it's something that I want to do, and I want to make sure the residents have that available to them, as well as the socialization. They pick their activities, whether it's bingo or whether it's card games, and we've had in many buildings some residents that are very adept at card games, and we sometimes have to monitor the amount of money that's wagered in some of those games. But we make sure that they're all taken care of from the perspective of they do what they want to do.
Now, we talked about assisted living, we talked about memory care, but we have two other types of care: long-term care and rehabilitation. Can you explain those two types of care and the relationship between them?
Well, long-term care is one word. Skilled nursing is another version of it. And the more common vernacular word would be a nursing home. And that's for people who have a much higher level of medical needs, much more impaired from that perspective. It's like assisted living in a sense, but it's a much higher level of care. And those rooms will be both a combination of private rooms, and we're going to have as many private rooms as possibly to fit in that building. And we're designing it in such a way to be able to have a maximum number of private rooms, even on the skilled side. And there too, the residents get activities, they get 3 meals a day. There's much more intensive medical monitoring from that perspective. And skilled nursing is monitored and regulated more closely by the New Jersey Department of Health than assisted living is. So in many ways, it's like a hospital. For those of us who have lived through the 60s and 70s, if you remember back in the 60s, when you had surgery, you stayed in the hospital 4 or 5 or 6 days. That's where the rehabilitation part comes in. Right now, and I think everybody on this call recognize, you go to a hospital, they just finished the procedure and they're telling you got to get out already. So it's the rehab that's done for that. And the rehab stay is generally somewhere between 15 and 30 days, depending on the type of rehab being given. And what's planned for this building is orthopedic rehab, cardiac rehab, stroke rehabilitation, as well as something addressing deconditioning, where somebody may have had an illness and has been bedridden for a period of time or has not been taken care of at home properly, where they have to be brought back up and given strength and activities to be able to do that.
Now,
And it's under rehab is under the same license that skilled nursing would be. It's just an element of skilled nursing.
now, is there a relationship here where a resident, for example, in assisted living might need rehabilitation after surgery or an injury, can get the rehabilitation and go back to their original assisted living life? Is that relationship?
Yes, that's the benefit of a full continuum. For instance, on our Bartley campus, we have that continuum. So in essence, people really never have to leave, in this case, the building, but in our case, in our Jackson facility, leave the campus. So what's we guaranteed here is that people have the ability to move from one area to the other. And it happens very frequently that somebody in assisted living will go to rehab, have their rehab, and then go back into their assisted living apartment, for their residency. In fact, in some cases, we've had residents complain that they didn't have the opportunity to go to rehab because the doctor didn't want them to go there. But in those cases, we give the rehab right in the assisted living.
Now, I think we talked about, at least before your testimony, about 255 beds and assisted living with 132 of those beds, long-term care, which is the skilled nursing, with 58, and rehab with 25. But there's a concept in here of flex space and the ability to meet the needs of long-term care versus rehabilitation residents. Can you comment on that a bit?
You talk about the flexibility that we're going to try to offer within this building?
Yes.
From that perspective? Yeah.
Yes.
The way the building is designed, and you've all seen the plans, each one of those units can be converted into any type of services. There'll be apartments. So depending on the needs at the time of the population, some of those assisted living units can be used for skilled nursing, and some of the skilled nursing facility units can be used for assisted living. That's a concept we will be presenting to the Department of Health to be able to give us that flexibility. And that is really what is the trend going forward. And basically what is being done in a lot of the facilities that are being built now is they're focusing more on individual rooms. That very helps significantly is with infection control, and certainly with things like if this pandemic doesn't ever go away, it's a lot easier to be able to isolate people when there's no roommate in that perspective. And what we're looking to be able to do is structure these units in such a way that we meet the needs of the community by what's important at that point in time. We anticipate that it would be 132 assisted living beds with more extensive services, and the skilled nursing would be a much smaller component, but the rehab may actually be a bigger component depending on what the needs are in the area. Because what we find is that, and why you see so many nursing homes, in the state, is that it's much better for families and for people when they have to do rehab to be able to do within a few miles of their home, as opposed to having to drive 10, 15, or 20 miles, which in New Jersey could mean an hour or so commute every day to go do something like that. So that's why we're proposing that flex type of structure.
Can you talk about the importance of having a facility like ours within the community from where the resident originally comes from, in terms of proximity to family, et cetera?
Well, we've seen both in New Jersey and in other states is that, well, unless it's a very rural area, most of the residents come from within a 7 to 10 mile radius of a facility. And most of them, most of the residents, especially in AL and in nursing homes to a lesser degree, are there because family members are in the area. You know, it's very common for somebody to be moved, resident to come from a different area, but they're coming into New Jersey or into, in this case, Ocean Township, because they may have a family member in Ocean Township. The other thing too is where maybe a husband and wife or sister, brother, or something like that, as far as the significant relatives, they want to be close by. And that, you know, that's one of the things that we see, that you know, there's a phrase in our business that all healthcare is local. And each area has their own specific needs. What's happening, unfortunately, in the post-acute area, especially with the significant financial impact of COVID, there are many, not many, but there are more and more facilities that are closing because they can't operate from the perspective of providing the level of care needed because they're in antiquated buildings or reasons like that. So they're closing and consolidating. So you're seeing at a period of time when more and more people are going to need the service as us baby boomers become of the age where the services are needed. Just like in the 50s, a lot of schools were built, and in the 2020 and 2030 period, many more accommodations for seniors will be needed, both on the skilled side and the assisted living side. And the ideal situation is have those available in the community, so people still have their connection to their family and their connection to the community.
In your observation, is visiting by family members an important factor, not only for the residents, but the family members themselves?
It's a very important factor, and unfortunately, in many cases, some of the residents do not get frequent visitors. But that's where the residents within an AL or within the nursing home become each other's family from that perspective. In our experience, we see that about 25% of the residents get a visit sometimes on a weekly basis, and those are spread out over a number of days. Obviously, on the holidays, the Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, et cetera, you see a higher rate of visitation.
Now, you mentioned about challenge to mobility. One of the, I guess I hesitate to call it an issue, but it's called a feature of our facility is that we have 4 stories, and that going up has prevented us from the need of having to go further out horizontally. And in terms of the welfare of the people that are going to be using this facility, how important is that, in terms of going up as opposed to spreading out?
Well, that's extremely important. In fact, what we've seen in a lot of the buildings that we manage is that one of the most popular meeting places is near the elevator because everybody wants to see who's coming and going. But the benefit that we have in the structure that we have here, I believe no unit is more than 100 feet long. So that would be the longest walk anybody would have from their room to an elevator to be able to get to the centralized services that are in the central core. That's especially important because the old designs used to be, you spread them out over a lot of land, but that becomes a real problem with people that have to, if you want to encourage them to be mobile themselves, it discourages people from doing that and does not keep people as mobile as they would be. But when they see a shorter distance to be able to go get those services, it's a lot easier to both manage, and it's a lot easier for the residents to navigate the building.
And these are walks that have to happen several times a day. You have 3 meals, you have other reasons to be in the central core. Is that true?
Yeah, your activities, rooms that are available for you, whether it's, for your exercise, for what life enrichment services are given, many, what we plan to have here is be able to bring people in for lectures and some social things from that perspective. And then there's, card games and bingo and whatever else the residents would want from that perspective. Those are generally in a centralized activities area, and the residents would be encouraged to be moving. But the easier it is to move a shorter distance, the more the residents do participate in an activity.
Okay. Now, we have proposed 3 shifts of employees, 90 employees on the 7 to 3 p.m. shift, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., 45 on the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and 30 on the 11 p.m. to the 7 a.m. Could you comment on that a bit as to whether that's adequate and how that sets up in your experience?
Well, that's an estimate based upon our experience in operating other buildings. And it really would depend on the level of care. As I indicated before, if it's a higher level of acuity from that perspective, we may have more. If it's a lower level, we may have less, but that's an estimate of a period of time. And some of those people work over, between two shifts. What we do, because of the it's difficulty now finding a lot of workers. So we've gone to things like 12-hour shifts. So there may be some of those 90 employees may work on the second shift of 45 employees. So those are estimates based upon a type of care we indicate. Now, over time that could change based upon acuity, and also could change based upon regulations. And those are the things that we have to comply with, the regulations that the New Jersey Department of Health will put in place, and then what CMS will put in place on the federal level.
So basically, while we're looking for local approvals here, in essence, this is just really the beginning of our regulation journey. From here, assuming we get approved, we're going on to the Department of Health in New Jersey. Is that correct?
Yes. A little note is that there are more federal regulations that the state then applies to skilled nursing than there are regulations dealing with nuclear power in this country. So what happens is, the way the regulatory structure is done is that on the assisted living side, there will there'll be a need for a certificate of need, which are very easily granted. And then that starts a process with both the Department of Health and the Department of Community Affairs. Department of Community Affairs reviews all the plans. They have to be designed, and the building has to be designed in such a way to meet those requirements. And the Department of Health also does that review. On the skilled nursing side, there will be a license needed for skilled nursing, which would apply to rehab and memory care. Licenses are available right now. There's no longer any certificate of needs available for that, because the bed need has been satisfied, but there are several licenses, and there is a license available for this facility to operate a skilled nursing. Now, there too, on the skilled nursing side, both Department of Health and Department of Community Affairs has to review and approve those plans. And the buildings have to be operated in accordance with the regulations required by the federal government through the Department of Human Services, which in their division is called CMS. It stands for the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services, and they regulate long-term care. And based upon the fact that these facilities will be paid for by Medicaid, Medicare, and private, as well as private insurance. So the Medicare and Medicaid portion is where the regulations come from. To be able to operate a facility in New Jersey, you have to be licensed to provide those services. In fact, it is required by New Jersey to provide both in assisted living and in skilled nursing a certain percentage of the beds available for low and moderate income, which would mostly be Medicaid beds. And in this case, 15% on the assisted living side has to be set aside for low and moderate income. And it's been our experience that those then units, being rental units, are available for a town's affordable housing requirements. I think with rental, you get a 2-to-1. I think for every rental unit, it's a 2-to-1 for that requirement.
That would help Ocean Township with their obligations for affordable housing.
They in fact have those obligations, yes.
Ocean Township presently does not have any provision in its land development plans and ordinances for a facility like ours. Can you comment as to whether there is a need for our facility that offers all 4 types of care and sets up a communal type of operation where you've described? Is there a need for this in Ocean Township?
Yeah, there is a need in Ocean Township. There's a need in Monmouth and Ocean County, especially more so in Monmouth County from that perspective, but in Northern Ocean County. As I indicated, some facilities, due to their age, are in the process of closing or will be closing over the next 4 to 5 years, because the buildings just are not up to the par of what is needed. And what happens is that a lot of the areas right now where there are facilities were more geared towards where hospitals used to be. And now the focus really is on putting facilities where the residents are, so that they can stay in the sense of community. The facilities that are in the area, we did a quick survey of that. Most of them either offer assisted living. In fact, the ones within probably a 10-mile radius of Ocean Township, I think the great majority of the facilities offer only assisted living. There are a few skilled nursing facilities. And there is no one that offers the full continuum. The closest any facility that offers that is, I believe it's Sunnyside Manor, which is a new facility in the Wall area. There is Seabrook, which is more of a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community that focuses primarily on independent living, has a small assisted living component and an even smaller skilled nursing component. And the other CCRC that's available is in Freehold. It's Applewood. It's in, I'm trying to think of it. I think it is in Freehold. It's in the northern part on the western side of Route 9. That's the closest ones that I'm aware of.
But Seabrook that you mentioned has a pretty large entry fee component, don't they?
Yeah, that's a CCRC, and their entry fee component is there. I believe it's somewhere over $250,000 has to be put up to be able to get in that facility. These units in this project will be all monthly rentals. And the way it be structured is that someone basically gets a 1-year agreement in assisted living, and it's a month-to-month situation or day-to-day situation, I should say, in skilled nursing.
I think I may have covered everything that I wanted to talk to you about. So at this point, I will cease my direct questioning of Mrs. Scalo and make him available for the board.
Okay, are there board members with questions?
I have a question, if I may.
Mhm.
So, sir, you mentioned earlier that the certificate of need process is rather easy. Could you explain the process a little more if you know it? I think it's a little more. Right?
The process is such is that you put an application in saying, I'd like to build an assisted living building, in a specific area, and they look at the track record of the person that's applying for it. You have to provide some financial information. You have to show that you have a site available and they have approval on the site to be able to get the certificate of need. And then they go through the process, and unless there's some significant problem with past record, you usually get it. The thing right now is New Jersey in particular is encouraging assisted living over nursing home from that perspective. And one of the risks that we see in some assisted living buildings is that people, some assisted living facilities, and I'm not going to mention names right now, are offering services that are far beyond their ability to be able to do that. So that's something that they'll be looking at and making sure that the services in assisted living are limited to the services that assisted living allows by regulation.
Right, but I mean, the certificate of need part, that emphasize the need part. So that review process through the Department of Health involves the State Health Planning Board or maybe the Commission.
No.
It's you need
it's more streamlined.
You need more. I should ask you, maybe I'm wrong. Do you need to demonstrate need based upon the area and based upon potential objections from other licensed facilities in the area? I'm just wondering if that's something that's you're gonna have to go through after us.
We have to go through a process with the Department of Health. The state planning and regional planning services for healthcare are no longer being used by the Department of Health. So what they will look at, they have statistics that show there's a need for X amount of assisted living beds in the state of New Jersey, and they don't look at it as a particular area. They do that on skilled nursing, and because that's a similar kind of concept with dealing with hospital need. But they don't do that for assisted living. It's a statewide review of what beds are basically, because the state looks at it as being apartments for seniors with services available, and they regulate the services.
So it's different than a call where there's some demonstrated need for a particular.
Yes, yeah, they haven't done. They don't do that. Department of Health has not done that in many years. And one of the reasons why there are so many assisted livings right now that you see maybe changing hands is that many developers over the years have decided they thought running an assisted living was just like running an apartment house, and they ran into trouble because of the care needs are a little different. And what we're trying to do with this project is really recognize that as people want to be in a more independent area, assisted living is going to need to offer more services, and having those in the same building allows us to be able to take care of people in assisted living at a much more advanced state than it would be in a freestanding assisted living. But that whole process of going through multiple steps, which I remember going through all these hearings, those are not in place any longer.
Okay, so then, just to wrap then my questions, your targets, they're based upon what the state has already either through their analysis regionally or statewide established that there's a need for X number of beds in this area, or residents, if you will, and that's already that. In other words, is that published already and something that you're working into your numbers, or is it something that you're going to have to say, this is what we think the need is, and demonstrate?
We're going to have to present that information, but as I said, the need portion of getting a certificate of need on the AL side it's a very low bar to jump over. And the reason for that is that they're encouraging assisted living. On skilled nursing, there are no certificates of need available. You have to have a license to be able to build a new nursing home. You have to have a license available to you, and that has to be transferred from another facility or what it's called a paper license that's available from a facility that has closed. And in this case, we have a license available, and
Sounds like a liquor license.
Excuse me?
Almost like a liquor license when they're all capped now. And
Yeah, not quite,
buy one or get
not
one.
quite as locally governed, but it's more governed by the state. And in many ways, yeah, I guess it is like a liquor license in that perspective. You know, you can't, you can have a BYOB, but you can't do that with a nursing home.
Yes. Okay. So then that was my last question. You'll already have the licensed healthcare. You have a licensed healthcare facilities. You mentioned.
I didn't hear the last
Was
part.
that your? I'm sorry. Did you in your opening? Did you indicate that you have other facilities in the state that are already licensed healthcare facilities?
Yes, yes, and I'm proud to say that on the skilled side, all of our facilities are 5-star. I think there's one a 4-star, but all of them are 4 or 5-star facilities.
Okay, and so just the last thing though is you need to demonstrate to the Department of Health that there is a need in this area for, say, 132 AL residents, and then in addition, you're I guess you step down more acute with this skilled nursing, and then any, of course, memory care residents, right?
And we do, but as I said, it's a low bar right now because there's a regional need according to the Department of Health based upon the demographics. So there's a regional need, and I don't know of any certificate of need that has been denied over the last several years.
Yeah, and I wasn't really going there as much as I'm thinking, well, in a little bit, and you don't get the number you want. Does that mean your facility adjusts, your plans adjust? And
yeah, in fact, you know, as we look at the plan, and as you know, to some degree, we originally started with the concept of 132 assisted living. It may very well be that some of those units will be turned into skilled nursing because there's a significant need, more of a need for skilled nursing. That's why the way the building is designed. And, you know, as you're probably understanding, you know, with your questions, is this is going to take another 3 or 4 years to be able to go through the C of N process, the licensing process, the state approvals for all the building plans. And as for any of you who deal with the state of New Jersey, especially the Department of Health, they don't move very fast. So, you know, as the way we're designing this building is be able to meet the needs that are going to exist when we open the building, you know, sometime in the next 4 or 5 years, pending the approval of this board.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I follow up on the certificate of need questions?
Yes.
I have a number of questions that I think that flow right in with the questions that Richard was asking. I don't want to interrupt board members who want to ask questions, but I think the flow would be much better. I'm involved, Mr. Scala, I'm involved with an application in Holmdel that involves assisted living for dementia people. And that application has a certificate of need. It's not site specific, and there is no approval in place for that. And that's contrary to what you were saying. I'm just trying to understand what the differences are.
No, it's not contrary. I mean, many, in past projects that we've worked on, we did have a certificate of need for the AL in place already. In this case, the owners decided to wait to see if they got the local approval to be able to apply for that certificate of need. But it's never been a problem for us getting a certificate of need for AL.
Oh, okay. I guess I misunderstood your testimony because I thought you said that to get the certificate of need, you had to have the approval and the site set up.
You don't have to have it, but it makes the process go a little bit easier when you can be able to tell the Department of Health, here's where I want to put it and why I want to put it there.
Okay. And the other thing is with this certificate of need for the facility in Holmdel, it's a certain region. It's apparently 9 counties. It's not statewide. So that was the other thing I just wanted to get clarification on.
Yeah, I did mention that the need is set out on a regional basis.
Oh, okay.
And they have their statistics, and I'm not an expert on those applications. We'd use somebody to be able to do that for us, but I know it's a regional. I don't know what the number is right now.
And do you know if a certificate of need application is applied for, that it would be an expedited application? The board members would understand what an expedited application is.
Well, expedited with the New Jersey Department of Health is a relative term. Well, maybe expedited for an applicant is, getting it done in a few months. What's expedited for the Department of Health is we'll get to it. We'll start looking at it in 6 months.
Well, expedited in the regulations states that the department has made a determination that approval of the certificate of need will not interfere with the operations of any nearby facility.
That's correct. You meant I thought you meant from the timing of getting it.
I meant from the nature of the application.
Yeah.
Itself. Okay.
And that's part of that regional planning from that perspective. Okay. And the same thing would have to go through for a license transfer. So license is not in the name right now of the owner of this project. It would have to the Department of Health would have to approve a transfer from the existing license owner to the new project.
Okay. And I have some other questions, but they're not related to the certificate of need. So I'll defer to board members, and then at the end I can ask those questions.
Okay, Ms. Talarico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. Not sure if it's specifically for the person that's given the testimony right now, but maybe he can answer them. So the proposed services are being modeled regarding or after Bartley Healthcare in Jackson. Is that correct or no?
To some degree, yes, but be a little more expansive and a little more flexible than we're able to offer in those buildings right now.
Okay, because I'm familiar with Bartley. I used to work in Ocean County Hospital System for 16 years. So I'm familiar with that particular assisted living. My next question is, does Seaview Corporation Park or their owners own, and you said they owned other facilities, are in New Jersey or other states? Or?
No. Our company, we have several companies we work with, and we're affiliated and have other facilities in New Jersey. It's not the applicant here that has any other facilities. It's just I give that as background for my expertise and my operational experience.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Then I misunderstood. I thought you said that there were other facilities owned by the applicant. No.
No, owned by our companies. And those in New Jersey are in Old Bridge, Wall, Hamilton, and Absecon, and I call it Hamilton. It's a town right next to Hamilton. I think it's part of the Trenton area. I'm not sure exactly what the town is in, but we consider it Hamilton.
Okay. So then I'm not sure if this is a relevant question or not, but my question was regarding like regulations and licensing for the applicant, but they have no other facilities. So my question was, is there any current or past violations or issues following any of the state or licensing regulations in New Jersey?
They wouldn't have any because they've never been licensed, and on the license that's available for them, there's no problem with that. And then what the Department of Health will look at is who is going to be the operator and look at that track record. And If it turns out that we're the operators, I don't perceive that being a problem, considering our track record is pretty good with the Department of Health.
Okay, and then my last question, I'm sorry, I have all these stickies. How will the referrals be prioritized? So would they be Ocean Township residents first, Monmouth County residents, hospital referrals? Would you be getting any from state hospitals?
Okay, let me answer it this way. You always want to give preference to the people in the community that you serve. You know, you want to be the number one choice for the community you serve. And in that case, yes, but as far as the types of referrals, they're different for each type of care. For assisted living, it's more of a longer range planning process, although it's increasingly getting shorter as people realize I need the care now. But generally, it's a several-month planning process where people apply, and it becomes both, you know, what their physical needs are, their medical needs are, and what their financial situation is to be able to qualify for assisted living. On the skilled nursing side, you know, referrals from the hospital, you know, it depends on what the urgency is there, and those are usually admitted first into a post-acute, the rehab area, and then the determination of whether they're eligible for skilled nursing or discharged to home is made while they're in the facility.
Okay, so there are going to be referrals from state hospitals or no?
There are no more state hospitals left anymore. You know, they've closed up all the state behavioral hospitals, but the referrals for this area most likely come out of the Hackensack Meridian system and the Barnabas RWJ Barnabas system, and they have the hospitals in the area. Those were most of the referrals will come from, and some do come from out of state. Being where Ocean Township is, I would predict that there would be some referrals from people who were in some of the New York City or some of the Pennsylvania hospitals because they have family members that live in the area.
And when I say state hospitals, I'm talking about Ancora, Greystone.
No, in fact, they're closing up. So this would not be. We're not looking to make this a behavioral health. That's a specific license, and you know, it's a very, very difficult thing to do, and that's something that's not anticipated for this facility. It's really not suited for it.
Okay, thank you for answering questions.
Any other board members with questions?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a unique facility in the fact that it has the 4 uses that are being proposed in the state, or are there other facilities that have these 4 uses combined into one facility?
In one building, I'm trying to think in New Jersey, I don't know of any. The continuums that are existing, we have the continuum at Bartley, which is assisted living through skilled nursing and rehab with memory care. And the memory care program goes through both buildings, as it would be in this building. We have, in a loose sense of the word, independent living, but we don't have it, you know, from the perspective of that being a major focus. The only other campus that I'm aware of, and it's also in separate buildings, is one in Bergen County, Christian Healthcare Center, that is now building assisted living, but mostly the buildings are separate buildings and have not been combined into one building from this perspective, so that people would have to move from building to building.
And based off of your testimony, there's beneficial use to having all 4 in one building.
Yeah, well, the example I can give you is that we often have, you know, husband and wife who have different care needs. One may need to be in memory care and the other in assisted living. One may need to be in assisted living and then the other in the nursing home. And having it in one building, you know, from that perspective, really, it really makes it, you know, more, it keeps the family together from that perspective. And the advantage of it really, from an operational perspective, is that you have everything stacked. So rather than going through 4 different buildings, there is one somebody may be familiar with. It's in Freehold, where they built a bunch of pods spread over a campus. And we had looked at that building at one point in time when we were being asked to manage it for the financing people that were foreclosing on it. And the problem I had with it is that it took me almost 10 minutes to walk from the outer pod to where the dining room was. So, so from that perspective, that's why they were having trouble. And I think they ultimately converted that building into something else. But the advantages of the elevator, it's sort of like, when you go to a hotel, if you go to a convention, you always look, how close is my room to the convention floor, from that perspective. And in this case, we're trying to keep it everything as close to the central core of activities to make it easier for all the residents to be able to do that, and regardless of their level of care.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members with questions?
Madam Chair, I had a question.
Yes.
Sir, you had mentioned part of the involvement with the state, it stems from the involvement of Medicaid and Medicare folks using the facility. And I just want to refresh my memory. I think you said 15% of rooms would need to be set aside from Medicaid. Is that right? Was that
in assisted living, any assisted living since I think it was like 2002 or something like that, the Department of Health put a requirement in that any assisted living facility that's licensed after that date must set aside 15% of its beds, which could be two people in one unit, for low and moderate income. And in the case here, it would be really 15% of the unit, would be set aside.
Okay.
And the low and moderate income is measured using the Section 8 housing requirements. It's an asset-based requirement.
Okay. And then in Jackson, I'm guessing you'd have that filled. You don't have trouble. The need is there, is what I'm trying to say. Am I right?
As an operator, there's too much need. I'd rather see more private, but we're seeing a lot of people that have that need, and we're servicing it. Our facility in Jackson actually was not required to do that, but we did it anyway, and we did it as part of Jackson didn't require it, and state didn't require it. We did it as part of our financing. And we found it to be a very, very good thing, because one of the things that you don't want to do in this kind of thing is say to people, which happens in a lot of the freestanding assisted livings, okay, you used up your funds. We're not taking Medicaid. You're on your own. What we've done in Bartley and what we intend to do in this building, if we're going to be operating it, is to say that you're guaranteed, a place in the continuum as long as you medically and financially qualify. And financially would include being eligible for Medicaid.
And then I'll just have two questions I'll give you, and then I'll listen. What's in Jackson, or what can we expect here to be the cost per month to stay? And then how does Medicare work into that, if at all?
Medicare rates are set by levels of care that are needed. It's called the PDPM system. Let me put it this way. I hire people that are experts to figure out, how that it's worked out, but it's basically on levels of care, and that's how you're reimbursed per day. On the Medicaid side, the state sets a rate per day. That's changing now, and it's based upon if you hit certain quality measures and certain other acuity measures, you get a different rate, and they're in the process of doing that right now. And what the rates would be at this point, I can't tell you what they're going to be 5 years from now. I can tell you that the expenses have risen dramatically, especially for labor, over the last 2 years alone. But currently Medicaid rates average in the state to be somewhere between $6,500 and $7,000 a month for skilled nursing. And private rates for the same would be $10,000 to $12,000 a month.
So are you saying that somebody who is Medicare eligible would have to pay the difference between the 10 and the 65? That's my question. How does that work?
Medicare, think of Medicare as being health insurance. Medicare is, you're over 65, you apply for Medicare, they pay, and rehab would be paid for by Medicare. Skilled nursing would be paid by Medicaid, which is same thing with assisted living. And that is a per dollar amount, either per day or per month. And that covers your housing, covers your medical services, covers everything. And that's set by the state. So in assisted living right now, a family could supplement the Medicaid rate to get somebody access where there's no Medicaid slots available to get at the private rate. On nursing home, you cannot. If a person's eligible for Medicaid, facility must accept that Medicaid rate and cannot look to the family or the resident for any additional money other than what's considered their cost share. When somebody's approved for Medicaid, depending on the person's pension, other income, the state pays a certain portion and the individual pays a certain portion. And that's on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask another follow-up
Yeah.
question that's related? You talked about the set aside for Medicaid being 15%. Are you certain that that's the set aside?
That's for assisted living.
I'm sorry, for Medicaid.
For assisted living. For skilled nursing, it's 45%.
Okay. And I know the only reason I asked that is because, again, this application that I'm involved in for 2 years in Holmdel, the set aside is 10%.
Yeah, the regulation, it is 10, it depends on when the application was made, and it depends, and the state has the flexibility to do either. We would most likely do the 15%.
Okay, that's what I wanted clarification on for the record. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Talarico?
2 more questions. How many residents would occupy one room in both the assisted living and and the nursing side?
It depends on the room. On assisted living, most people would have their own room, own bedroom. In some cases, the 2-bedroom units would be occupied by 2 people, 1 in each bedroom, and there'd be a little common area, which is like a little kitchenette or sitting area. But the studio would be 1 person. The state has requirements by how many square feet has to be available per person in a room. And we do have situations where, husband and wife will occupy 1 bedroom, 1-bedroom unit. But that has to be the unit has to be comply in size in assisted living with the requirements the state has for the size of the building. In nursing home, there'll be a combination of 1 and 2-person rooms. And again, no size of those, and right now, off my top of my head, I can't tell you what that size is, but you'd be set that way. There will not be any 3-person or 4-person rooms on the skilled nursing. And as I indicated, because we know where the things are going, we're looking to have a much higher concentration of private rooms. So some of the rooms will be smaller and actually built in such a way that it could not be occupied by 2 people.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, how long are you required to hold a bed for a client on the skilled nursing side that's transferred to a hospital for either medical reasons or psychiatric?
It depends on assisted living. I believe it's 10, and on Medicaid for skilled nursing, it's 10 days, I believe. On private, they have to opt to do a bed hold because they have to, if they don't pay for the bed, they could be discharged. But as a practical matter, this is their home. The beds are made available unless somebody has some extensive hospitalization. There may have to be some changes, but in my experience, and I can't think of any where we've said to somebody, you can't come back because we sold your bed to somebody.
Okay, and is there a handbook or anything that the board can review that's existing? Because since this is going to be modeled after Bartley, can we review that or no?
I wouldn't say it's going to be modeled after Bartley. I mean, we have brochures and stuff, yeah, but I'm not sure that that's going to be helpful in this building. But we do have brochures about the size, and I know we're in the process of redoing our website, but there's information on the website also.
Okay, I mean, I was looking for more of like what a client would be experiencing at the new facility.
I'm not sure how I can provide that to you because it's a different building. I guess what we'd be showing is, from the perspective of you would see whether it's this building or any building, you'd see what facilities are available. At Bartley, we have Main Street in the assisted living where a lot of the services go through that. I'm a big Disney fan on customer service. So we built a Disney Main Street from that perspective that has we call it a casino. It's basically a card room, and we have a library, we have a wellness center, we have an exercise center, we have a theater, and the same thing would be done in this building. The units themselves are basically the same, from building to building. One bedroom will have a separate room with a closed door for the bed, a sitting area, which will, like a little living room, which will also include a little kitchenette type of thing, and a bathroom, which will be, for the most part, handicap accessible. And a 2-bedroom would have the same kind of structure in assisted living, except there'd be 2 separate bedrooms. Nursing home would have 1 or 2 beds with a bathroom and a shower, most likely in most of the rooms from that perspective. And memory care would be set up. What we'd anticipate here is to do something similar to what we've done at Bartley, and make it in such a way that they're all studio units for the memory care. And one of the things that we set up is you accommodate the room based upon what a person with memory care has. And there's certain things they can't see, and for instance, one little thing that was done is that there's a day closet, so they can be independent. You put their clothes in for that day. So rather than looking into a closet like we all do, what am I wearing today? That could be overwhelming to somebody with dementia. So those little design changes would be there from that perspective, as well as colors and things like that would be set such a way so that people can distinguish, what's going on. In fact, with dementia, there's a thing I've gone through where they put things like marbles in your shoes, give you a pair of safety goggles with Vaseline over it, and put gloves on you with things in there. And then this is what you have to be able to try to navigate something. And that's where you understand how a room in an area should be built, be able to accommodate those needs.
What about medication management for the assisted living? Is there assistance?
Yes. In fact, in all admissions to assisted living, at least good assisted living, there's a thorough analysis that's going to be done of what the medication and what the care is and who the physicians are. And there'll be a physician that'll be assigned as the medical director for each one of the different units. And that person will be part of a care team that'll examine what the person needs in that setting and determine what's available. And medication management in assisted living, generally, people get their own medication. It's delivered by a pharmacy that the facility works with, but it's their individual medication. Some people give their own medication, but others will go down to what we call the wellness center and be given their medication, or a nurse will go around to different rooms depending on the time of day and give people their medication.
Wonderful. Thank you.
In a nursing home, it's like a hospital.
Right,
a nurse will administer the medication just like it would be in a hospital.
Are there daily trips or anything like that for the residents in the assisted living side?
Yeah. We plan in this to have vans to be able to take people to medical appointments or different things, and as well as a bus to take them to different things. One of the things that we work with is with the Jersey Shore. I think they're called the Jersey Shore Blue Claws now. We have aspects to be able to bring residents to that. One of the big things is going to malls. Go to Point Pleasant Boardwalk, things like that. Those trips are available. And sometimes you just go for a scenic ride. And luckily in Monmouth and Ocean County, there are a lot of parks available that people can go spend some time outside.
Thank you.
Any other board members with questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
So, there'll be a lot of consumption of food, paper products, stuff like that. Is it typical in the business model to try and partner with local resources for that, say like a local coffee shop to provide, coffee on a daily basis, or the food stores or anything local like that to help further the business in the community?
It's done on a combination of basis. Obviously you want to get the best price for something, but you want to have quality. And what we've always done is try to support the local people, because if nothing else, when you have a need, if that big supplier like a U.S. Foods or didn't deliver, you want to be able to have a relationship with a local provider to be able to get what you need. The other thing that happens is a lot of the staff members, they shop in the local stores too, because it's easier to stop after work or before work to get something than it is to go someplace else. The other thing that from a pure business perspective, if you have a good relationship with the other businesses in the community, they're more apt to refer people to you.
Thank you.
Any other board members' questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not a board member, but the attorney for the board. Mr. Scalo, you're testifying as an expert with experience in running these types of facilities. However, your company is not engaged and at this point may or may not run this facility. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want the board to realize, and if he doesn't run it, I don't know who will and what type of background or experience or track record that facility will be managed by.
Well, anyone that would be managing this would have to pass the Department of Health scrutiny for transfer of license. And because of some problems that have existed over the last few years, that process is getting much more stringent. So anybody that would manage this facility would have to pass their requirements.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'm sure I'm not going to judge whether or not you'd be better or they would be better or just as good. I just want the board to realize that you may not have any participation whatsoever in this facility.
I thought you were acting as my agent. I thought you were acting as my agent.
I'm going to get you the gig. We'll see.
Okay.
I just want the board to realize that. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Will there be any restrictions on how food is prepared in the facility?
There are a lot of restrictions on how it's prepared.
Well, dietary.
Each resident has a required dietary plan to fit their medical needs, and how the food is prepared, at what temperatures, what's available, is all highly regulated by the Department of Health.
Thank you.
Mr. Scalo, a question. You mentioned that certain buildings will be closing. I'm sorry.
Somebody's talking over you. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay. You mentioned that buildings will be closing 4 to 5 years. Which buildings are those?
No, I can't tell you any particular one. And if I did know, I couldn't tell you anyway. It would be a problem. But what we're seeing on a national basis is because of, a lot of the buildings, nursing homes in particular, were built back in the 60s and 70s. They don't fit the needs by way of ventilation and that, and even size of rooms, and some safety measures like sprinklers and stuff. So some of those are closing for that perspective, and they're building new buildings in that case. Others are closing because in New Jersey, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of, for lack of a better term, mom and pop operators. And it's getting, as regulations have become more significant, as reimbursement issues have become, more complex, a lot of the small operators are saying, I just can't do this anymore. My son or daughter doesn't want to do the business. I'm going to get out. So there'll be some closings. In fact, in New Jersey, there's been a few where my battery's going low here. There's been a few that I know of, people that I've been in the business with a long time have gotten out and sold their buildings to someone. In fact, 2 people in particular have closed it up. The one that has gone into a different building, I mentioned before, Sunnyside Manor. It used to be in an old house in Wall Township off Ramshorn, and they built a new facility a little bit away from that. So from that perspective, we're going to see some facilities closing because people just can't do it, or the buildings are just not suited. I know of probably 3 or 4 in the Ocean County that have closed.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I had, if I could, just one follow-up question from Mark's question. Sir, so your testimony regarding the operations and expectations of the operations, that based upon how you've been involved in your career, we don't have any guarantee though that whoever ultimately operates this, even if it's you, will be able to convince the owners that that's the way to do it.
Well, I can answer that question very easily. The Department of Health and CMS have very strict regulations, and if you don't operate in accordance with that, you're out.
I understand, but they're whoever they are, they're not here. You're testifying. I just want to now characterize what I've heard. So you're testifying as an expert as to what these facilities and how they should be run, And
By
we should
regulation.
expect them to be run, and we expect them to be run per regulation, but you're not actually going to be running it.
I'm not contracted to run this, and I'm not a principal at this point in time. But the regulations are very stringent from the Department of Health, and whoever runs the facility has to comply with those very strict regulations.
I understand that completely. I understand those regulations as well. And your testimony to us, I just wanted to characterize for me anyway, that is how you expect it to be run, but you're not actually contracted to run it. You've testified to that. So you've answered my question. I appreciate it.
Any other board members with questions?
Madam Chair, I have a couple quick questions. Hopefully. First of all, you testified that RNs are available around the clock. Does that mean they'll be on site around the clock, or will you have an RN available there like 8 hours a day?
It'll be on site. Because one of the benefits of doing it in one building is on skilled nursing, you're required to have an RN, at least one RN, depending on the size of the building, but at least one RN 24 hours a day. So what'll happen is that RN will be available. There'll always be an RN available, and most likely for the night shift, it'll be the supervisor and maybe one or two other RNs, depending on the census in the skilled nursing side.
And with regard to the memory care section of the assisted living, are they going to be isolated from the other people in the assisted living, or is there going to be some kind of a mechanism to allow them to somehow interact? Or because I know when you generally have assisted living facilities and there's a memory care facility there, it's basically an isolated section of the building and the people are not allowed to interact with anybody else in the building.
Okay, I wouldn't use the word isolated. I'd use the word a secured unit. It's a secured unit. Yeah.
Let's put it this way. My wife had dementia.
Okay.
And I looked at facilities like this, and I don't want to be inflammatory, but I looked at them as modern day leper colonies. They lock people in, they keep them in, they secure them, but really they don't have any interaction with anybody outside the building. They interact with each other and with the staff, and that's pretty much it.
Well, that's first of all, that's contrary to what the regulations are, and it's also contrary to good care practices. Generally, what is done and what's anticipated in this building is to have a secured unit so that people can't wander out. I mean, that's one of the biggest risks for somebody with related dementia. And then the programming is such, and the advantage in a building like this, you can do programming where people, if their dementia level is would allow for them to be comfortable interacting, they would in some activities would be interacting. It's designed here. There would be a separate dining area for the secured memory care unit, and again, it's a matter of it's a matter of providing a person with dementia with the proper stimulation, but not overstimulating. So, they would be uncomfortable getting lost. And probably you experienced this. One of the really fundamental things of having dementia is that the person doesn't understand what's going on around them. For instance, if a person has the flu or COVID for that matter, they're very confused because they don't know what's going on with themselves. So they may look like they're really deteriorating, but it's a temporary thing. Yeah. Some people need a certain security. They know where they have to go. It's familiar to them. And it's all short-term memory is where it goes. So you want to set up an environment that's secure for them, comfortable for them, but yet gives them enough stimulation to be able to live their life to the fullest they're capable of doing.
Yeah, that was my real question is, was there some sort of a mechanism to allow particularly those with the lower level of dementia to have some freedom and be able to stimulate a little bit. Okay.
And that's good practice, and well as what the Department of Health does encourage people to do. They look at that.
Yeah. Okay. And then two other quick questions with regard to the flex concept of adjusting the number of beds depending upon the need. Are there any facilities that you know of in New Jersey or the country that actually operate that way now?
Yeah, there are facilities in the country that are doing that. This is a thing that's being done in Oregon to some degree, California to a lesser degree. And in some of the rural states in mid-America, they have to do this as a matter of course, because there may be a 40 or 50 bed facility that has to service an area where there may not be another facility for 20, 30 miles away. So that they've been doing that. And there's a concept called the beehive concept that's used in Utah and Nevada that's very similar.
Are there any, do you know of any certificates of need or approved state approvals in New Jersey for this type of facility?
This is more of a conceptual thing in a sense. Licensing would be a license for assisted living, a license for skilled nursing. And how we interact and do that would be the operational part of it. But there would be a specific license for a specific number of beds for assisted living and a specific license for a specific number of beds of skilled nursing.
Okay, and so those couldn't be adjusted? I mean, how would it?
The way it would be done, for instance, if you have a license for 100 bed assisted living facility, and if you're not using those and you have a license for 100 bed skilled nursing in the same building, but you only have 80 beds occupied, you can then, if the rooms will fit the requirements of the Department of Health for skilled nursing, you can transfer those over. Same thing with assisted living. So the plan here, by the way I understand the design, is to design a certain number of the one of the units to be able to be used as either assisted living or skilled nursing beds, depending on the need.
Okay.
And it would be designed for the higher level of requirement.
Okay. And then just one other question. You talked about the sense of community. Now, a number of the members, particularly assisted living, are going to be full-time residents of Ocean Township. What kind of mechanisms are made available for them to vote, that type of thing, since they will be residences?
Well, depending on what should be done and what we've done in the past in our buildings is we will bring people to the polling place. More often now is with New Jersey in particular, having the ability to vote by mail. Yeah. That's encouraged. In fact, a lot of our legislators like coming to assisted living and nursing home buildings because it's a good place to meet people, and it's also a good place to get a lot of votes.
That's all I have.
Okay, any other board members with questions? Okay, any questions from the public? Let's see, MW?
That's me.
State your name.
That's me. My name is Mark Witter. Mr. Scalo, first of all, I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Your credentials are obviously impeccable. Your business model is obviously successful. You dropped law to do this. So, I mean, you're clearly a bright guy. And the first thing you said was, I have no financial involvement in this at all. And then I heard, I'm not contracted at this moment. The only word I didn't hear was yet. The way you spoke was like, this is what, and you did say this is what we're going to do. You were involved in planning. The advertisement is wonderful for this thing. And again, look, this is America, I get it. But we're talking about the quality of life before this thing is built. And you said yourself, this could take 4 to 5 years. So I have to live with 4 to 5 years of dirt and dust and all this other stuff. I just think we got off track.
Question. I will have to ask if there's a question at this point.
Do you plan on being involved?
Do I plan on? I've had discussions with them, yes. And
thank you. I got my answer. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Got my answer. Thank you very much. I understand.
I just want to be clear about one thing, because I don't like the suppositions that's floating out there. Mr. Scalo has been our consultant for the past 4 to 5 years. That's when we began this project. He has given us invaluable insight. He has given us insight on the design of the building. He has given us insight as to the kinds of things we have to be prepared to offer within the building itself. And at this moment, there is no obligation of Mr. Scalo to us or us to Mr. Scalo, other than the fact that he is a consultant to this project. I want to be very clear about that.
You're very clear. I heard exactly what you said.
Okay, I just want to be clear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And if
Are
I just
there
give
other-
another qualification, if it works out that I am involved in a project, just so that from my own perspective, I value my reputation, I value our background, I would not get involved with somebody who would not be doing, what I thought, and if I would not be spending the last 4 years with this applicant, and if I didn't think that they were going to be doing what needed to be done in the way that I thought it needed to be done.
Like I said, I have no problem with your credentials. You can rattle off and you clearly are going to do things the right way. That was not a point at all. That was a given.
All right, thank you.
I just was hearing the other side too, and I had to raise the question. So I thank you.
Okay, are there other questions?
I have one
Other
other question.
questions
I have
from
a
the public?
question.
Yes, Mr. Spire?
Mr. Scalo, you kept talking about how this facility would be multiple stories with elevators and it's better than having separate buildings. Would you discuss or answer the question, what happens if there's an emergency like a fire in there? And you've talked about how many people will be on staff. Who's going to get all these people down the elevators or stairs or out of this building should there be an emergency?
Well, one of the advantages of the way this building is designed is that the units would be segmented. So if there's a problem in one particular unit, it doesn't necessarily going to transfer into the other part of the unit. What generally happens, and first of all, just remember the construction of a building like this is highly regulated. It'll have sprinklers. It'll have it won't be any flammable material from that perspective. So it would be handled like there would be in any other multi-story residential thing. The only difference would be is that we'd have a lot more people to help with evacuation. But generally what happens in a building like this is that the emergency services would be very reluctant to evacuate an entire building because of the care needs of people. It's better to isolate the incident and then keep people in an area where they can be safe from that perspective. So one of the advantages of this wheel and spoke type of construction is they, in essence, in many ways, are separate buildings from where the living units are, and it's the core that connects it all. So from an operational as well as a safety perspective, it gives you the area. It's almost like in a ship where they close the hatch, to segment the parts of the building. It'd be the same type of thing.
Thank you.
Okay, Jess Levy?
Peter Falvo, please.
Well, first of all, I don't, Shawanda, I don't know where they're coming from, our questions, whether they're Nobility Crest. At this point, Nobility Crest is not permitted to ask questions.
I apologize. I'll ask them to identify.
I think the questions are important. But let's try to
clarify. Okay.
stick to that one. Okay.
Jess Levy or Levy? I see a hand raised.
Peter Falvo.
Hold on, Mr. Falvo.
Sure.
I'm going to give Jess Levy one more.
Jess Levy is muted.
If you are speaking, you're muted. But I do see the hand
He's a
raised.
Nobility Crest guy. He's a Nobility.
Okay.
Okay. I just have a quick question. How many people?
Hold on, Mr.
What-
Levy. If you can identify, are you with Nobility Crest?
I'm with Nobility Crest, but it's just a simple question about numbers of staff.
We
required.
can't really start questions from Nobility Crest yet. Ask that through Mr. Gazarovski, and he will ask that. And then if it's not answered after Mr. Gazarovski finishes, we'll make a determination of whether or not Nobility Crest residents can start asking questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Falvo does not live in Nobility Crest, that much I know.
No, I'm in Cedar Village. Mr. Scalo, have you personally operated a facility of this nature?
I've operated those areas and we've done it in a continuum on a campus. Yes.
And with regard to your consultation with this development, did you have input into the design of the floors, et cetera?
Yes, I did.
And with regard to the nursing home capacity, when I looked at the plans, unless they've been modified, I didn't see any nursing station or any drug closet, et cetera, on the plans?
Nursing stations is the design that I've seen, are at the end of, where the middle part of the spoke, the hub is. At the end of that is a nursing station. It's not going to be in the traditional sense of this big centralized nursing area. It's because the unit sizes are smaller. There'll be set up in such a way that it's it's right at the entrance of that unit where the person comes in.
Where is he? Can we call up the architectural plans to look at? Where is he? What's?
I don't have I don't want to have the capability of doing that, nor do I have them with me. So I'll defer to Mr. Donner.
Well, Mr. Lerman,
yeah, but let me just add this. The Department of Health and Department of Community Affairs will review the plans, and I will tell you there will be a requirement for a nurse's station on every unit. You cannot get approval without having a nursing station, available for each one of the skilled nursing units.
Do we know what the square footage of these units are?
They're going to vary. I don't have it in front of me right now, but they will vary, and they'll be designed in such a way to meet the square footage requirements per person on the skilled nursing side, and the square footage requirements per person on the assisted living side. What we find is that in the concept in this building, the way it's designed, is to have a significant amount of common space and having efficiently designed the living units.
Or unmuted. You're not muted. All right, with regard to the rooms, when I looked at the plans, again, unless they've been modified.
I'm having trouble hearing you, sir.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fading out, Peter. Your computer.
Okay, with regard to the plans, the assisted living, let me rephrase that, all of the units have bathrooms. With regard to the bathrooms, are there showers or there tubs?
There'll be showers.
Okay.
And
are
by the
there-
way, the floor plan itself has not been finalized because that's going to be subject to what the then existing regulations are with the Department of Health. And that's something to still be worked on. What you have in those plans is a general concept of where things are going to go. If I stay involved as a consultant, as we work through that, there'll be a lot of flow being done and an allocation of how many 1-bedroom, how many 2-bedroom you want to put on a specific unit, and how many on skilled nursing, how many 1-bedroom or 2-bed units, 2-bed rooms you want to put. So that's still subject to regulations and fitting everything they need that has to be fit in. It's very possible that when we do that, we may wind up with less beds than we're proposing at this point in time. Certainly not more.
Would it be fair to conclude that you're going to have staff on every floor so that if anything happens to somebody in the assisted living or in the nursing home or the memory care, there's going to be a professional on hand to render assistance?
That's correct.
With regard to these various units, you've had input on the site plan as well.
I couldn't hear the last part. What about the site plan?
Have you had input as to the site plan?
I did not have a lot of input to site plan. That's not my area of expertise. The input I did have on the site plan is I felt that there should be outside areas involved so that we could have outside access to courtyards, and those as those spokes go out, some of those will be closed in by fencing to be able to allow outside space, but yet, especially with the secure area, not allow people to wander out, but there'll be outside space available. That was the one input. And the other input I had was on the services being an essential core from that perspective so that they're not spread all over the building from a efficiency aspect.
With regard to the central core and central dining, the nursing home operation, they're not going to go to central dining, is that correct?
No, that's not correct. In fact, again, by the Department of Regulations and good practices, you want people to go to the dining room. In fact, it's better to have people go to a dining room, even if they need significant assistance to get there. It's best for socialization, and it's also best not to have people eating in their bed. They really need to get out of their bed and be moving around.
But if they're not ambulatory, how do you get them there?
In certain situations, in a rehab in particular, that'll be the case. And if they're not ambulatory to the point where they're bedridden, the food will be served in the room. But my experience, and again, depends on the acuity level. My experience is that in a skilled nursing, more than half of the residents do eat in a dining room.
So they're going to be serving 3 meals a day. Is that correct?
That's correct, and snacks or whatever else they need.
As I understand it, it's anticipated to have 253 beds.
It's set up for 255, I believe, isn't it? I believe it's 255. I don't have the number in front of me.
255.
So if I multiply that by 3 meals a day, that's 765 meals a day.
Not easy. It's not easy, but you have to do it.
Okay. And that's 5,355 a month. I mean, a week.
I'm not calculating as you're doing it, but I don't think at it in that way. When I look at it as residents need to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner and a snack whenever they want, and that's made available to them.
Well, I guess my next question is, if that volume of meals, would it be fair to assume that the food products, milk, dairy, meats, fish, whatever you're going to serve, come in through your tractor trailer?
Some of it does, yes.
And how many times a week or a day would they come in?
I can't say exactly how many times. It depends on the ordering. If the building is managed in the right way, you'll get a delivery. You'll get a delivery of from a major food supplier probably once a week. Some cases it may be every other week, depending on the product. They have to have
specialized staff if they're going to
produce. Somebody's talking right now. Like for instance, produce may be delivered daily. That's one of the things that would be obtained most likely from local providers. So some of that stuff is fresh daily. Some of the meat supplies will be fresh daily. And it really depends on the needs. But there will be deliveries pretty much every day. Not necessarily tractor trailers.
But some of the food stuff, well, let me ask you a question. You're going to have linen service as well?
I didn't hear that. What kind of service?
Linens?
Yeah, well, some of that, again, depending on cost factors, some of it's done in-house, some of it's sent out. The most efficient way, in my opinion, is to do it in-house.
And is there a provision in this plan for a laundry on site?
Yes, there's and again, that's required by design regulations from the Department of Health to have a laundry area. On assisted living, it's required, and there'll also be on the units to allow people to do their own laundry. There'll be a personal laundry thing with, depending on the size of the thing, anywhere between 1 and 3 dryers and washers that people can do their own laundry if they want to do it.
But if you qualify for assisted living, isn't there 3 or 4 criteria? You need assistance in ambulating, assistance in showering, possibly assistance in dressing, things of that nature? Well,
you can, I'll give you a personal example. My mom lived in the assisted living because my dad was in the nursing home and having rehab. She didn't need any of that, but she could stay in the assisted living. They had to comply with the regulations for that. But at a certain point in time, if your needs are so high that you cannot qualify for assisted living, meaning it's too much, at that point in time, you can stay there if you had private care that would administer to all of that, or you would be transferred to a skilled nursing facility. So the qualification is on the high end, because by regulation, you can only do certain medical things in certain areas that you can do in assisted living. The simple way to describe that, if you need 24-hour nursing care, you do not belong in assisted living. And by regulation, you cannot be in assisted living unless you have private duty 24 hours a day in that room.
Okay, Mr. Falvo, we're at your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Are there other members from the public with questions?
Could we have Mr. Gazarovski repeat his email, please? Being that we're not permitted to speak.
Mr. Gazarovski?
Could he repeat his email, being that we're not, yeah.
Where's the email?
No, it's GASIOWSKILAW Gazarovski@gmail.com.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions from the public? Okay, not seeing any. Mr. Donner, I believe you said you have one more.
Yes, I have.
Aylin, the planner.
I have Ms. Allen, our professional planner. Yes.
Okay, I would like to.
Madam Chair, could we ask for a 5-minute break?
That's what I was going to. If we could actually.
10 minutes, yes.
If I could have 10 minutes, that would be great. So can
Yeah.
we just come back at 9 o'clock?
9 o'clock. Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
What's happening, you know what I mean?
Okay. I have 9:01, and Nicole, if you can please call the roll.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Fuller,
I'm here.
Mr. DeLomo, Mr. Manel,
Here.
Vice Chair Van Wagner,
Here.
Mr. Ashkenazi, Mr. Mamie, Ms. Talarico,
Here, I'm sorry.
it's okay. Mr. DeGennaro,
Here.
Mr. Pugielli,
Here.
and Madam Chair.
Here. Okay, Mr. Donner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I'd like next to call to testify Barbara Allen, who is our professional planner.
I'm gonna wave just to.
Okay, yes, I see you.
There
Thank
we
you.
go.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Now,
Have you oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, Madam Chairman, Ms. Allen has testified in Ocean Township before. Ms. Allen, have you testified before the zoning board in Ocean Township?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so you've been with me with the planning board on a number of occasions. I was unsure about the zoning board, but her credentials as a professional planner and a member of Beacon Planning have been accepted by the board, I believe, previously.
Okay, then we will continue to accept.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Allen, good evening. Thank you for waiting around so long. We appreciate it. I'd like to ask you, have you visited our site, and can you, in fact, describe the site to us?
Yes, I have visited the site. This parcel is located along the northern side of Route 66. It is between Cedar Village Boulevard and Freehold Road. The parcel itself is located within the township's planned adult community overlay portion of the 01/20 office limited service zone. So the underlying zoning in this area would permit items such as office buildings, laboratories, indoor recreational facilities, etc. The overlay zone, on the other hand, permits senior citizen apartments. And as has been discussed over the last few hearings, what is proposed this evening is a multi-stage assisted living facility containing space for assisted living, long-term care and rehabilitation and memory care.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
Okay. So the use this evening is not specifically permitted within the zone, and nor is it anticipated anywhere in the community. Therefore, a D1 variance is requested. The parcel itself contains about 13.5 acres and is irregularly shaped and is currently vacant with heavily wooded areas within its more southern areas, though there are existing wooded areas in the northern areas as well. The 4-story proposed age-in-place facility will be located more towards the northern portion of the site, which has already been disturbed. The southern area will now be disturbed for a limited time frame in order to permit the construction entrance. Existing vegetation along the parcel's northern and eastern perimeters will largely remain intact in order to provide a visual buffer to the adjoining Cedar Brook Village and Nobility Crest. And any areas that are kind of a little bit thin will be supplemented with additional landscaping. In order to access the site, the applicant is proposing to have a drive off of Cedar Village Boulevard. And in order to accommodate that, is proposing improvements to Cedar Village Boulevard. It'll include the gated entry, and the improvements will include an upgraded gatehouse capable of occupancy. Therefore, will be provided heating, air conditioning, a bathroom, and additionally, a turning lane will be provided to access the applicant's facility from Cedar Village Boulevard. With respect to the site itself, as I stated, the facility will be located more towards the northern area that has already experienced disturbance. And in that area, we are proposing to regrade in order to bring the finished floor elevation of the proposed structure down to 110, where the current elevation of the property is 139. The existing elevations outside of this area will remain intact, and therefore the structure will be, and the structure and associated improvements will essentially be lowered or like sunk, and there'll be a natural berm that forms around it as a result of that. The site will also be improved with an underground stormwater management system that'll be independent from the adjoining developments so as to not burden same. And due to these elevation changes, I'm sorry to jump back, the proposed height of the building will appear more as a 3-story, similar to Nobility Crest. Before getting into the specifics of the use variance, I want to take a moment to go through the community's master plan. The goals and objectives of the 1990 master plan include to provide an adequate, affordable, and balanced supply of housing types for the current and prospective population of the township, to provide adequate, affordable housing to senior citizens, to provide adequate recreational facilities for the growing senior citizen population of the township. And in this instance, as was testified to, the facility itself will be able to provide a number of services, and as was testified to, there'll be cards, there'll be day trips, there'll be enrichment provided there and then. There's also 2 goals, continuing with goals, to ensure the future development of the township provides for a stable tax base. To ensure that land development in the township provides a balance of land uses, which will help maintain the quality of life within the township for all of its current and future citizens. So in this instance, we're providing an expanded range of housing for some of the most vulnerable of the community in a manner that allows them to stay in the community. Next is to ensure that future development occurs in an orderly manner is consistent with other planned development in the township. This area has been singled out or identified as an area for senior housing. And to ensure that future development in the township provides for the protection of environmentally sensitive land as identified in the conservation element of this plan. So the applicant is limiting intrusions into existing wooded areas, is limiting intrusions to wetlands, and will be restoring them post-construction. The creation of senior housing within planned adult communities was actually first discussed within the November 30th, 2000 reexamination report of the master plan, which noted the demand and need for same. Specifically, the report states, due to the demand and need for various forms of senior citizen housing, as determined in the purposes of the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law, the township should allow for the construction of various forms of senior housing in planned adult communities and smaller senior living facilities. During this time, only 2 types of senior housing were proposed, age-restricted single-family homes and senior apartments. And these types of units do provide for a need in the community for those who are downsizing and those that are looking for a neighborhood of this character. But they tend to address those adults who are more active. The proposed use, an age-in-place facility, was not anticipated at that time, but is intended to provide a care option for the aging element of the senior population. So those who wish to stay in their community, close to friends, close to family, close to known healthcare providers, a manner in which to do that. We can also look to the municipal land use law for special reasons. A, to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. It does promote the welfare of this segment of the population and the matters that we have discussed. E, to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of person, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservation of the environment. So this area has already been designated as appropriate for senior housing. And so this is a continuation of that in a different form, meeting a new need or a need that's expanding at the moment. G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, and industrial uses and open space, both public and private, according to their respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. As I just stated, this is an area that has been determined to be appropriate for senior housing, and the type of housing proposed is meeting a need of New Jersey citizens and of this community in specific. To encourage senior citizen community housing construction. This is a form of it, particularly with the assisted living facility. And M, to encourage coordination of the various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with a view of lessening the cost of such development and the more efficient use of land. So the property is appropriately located within an area designated for senior housing. It has access to existing services such as water, sanitary sewer, and has access to existing infrastructure. So when we look at a use variance, there are different standards for different types of uses. The uses proposed herein, an agent, this facility will contain assisted living, long-term care, rehabilitation, and memory care facilities. New Jersey courts have found that assisted living and memory care centers are inherently beneficial. An inherently beneficial use is, and I quote from NJS 40:55D-4, is as use which is universally considered of value to the community because it fundamentally serves the public good and promotes the general welfare. Such a use includes, but is not limited to, a hospital, school, child care facility, group home, or wind, solar, or photovoltaic energy facility or structure. Assisted living, long-term care, and memory care facilities fall within this definition. And Mr. Higgins, in his review letter dated October 13, 2021, concurs. As an inherently beneficial use, the proposed use presumptively satisfies the positive criteria associated with the use variance. Therefore, the applicant, instead of addressing the Medici criteria, is actually switched over to the SICA balance test, which has 4 standards. The first is to identify the public interest at stake. The second, to identify any detrimental effect that would ensue from the grant of the variance. The third is to study whether the detrimental effect could be mitigated by imposing reasonable conditions. And 4, weigh the positive against the negative criteria. In identifying the public interest at stake, I note that Mr. Scalo actually did an excellent job of addressing this. And it's as the population continues to age, these facilities will become more and more important to provide care for the community members in a location that is close to home, close to family members, and into the community that they've grown to love. The applicant is proposing to reserve 15% of assisted living units for low to moderate income residents, thereby providing a chance to age in place to low and moderate income residents of the community as well. With respect to the township itself, this facility is not presently offered to residents and was not anticipated within the township's ordinances. And as it is not permitted anywhere in the community, As was discussed by Mr. Scalo, there is a lack of these types of facilities from the community and the surrounding area. As a result, community members would need to leave the area in order to obtain these types of services. And as was also testified to, there's a limited number of these facilities that actually provide these types of services kind of stacked in one building. The next criteria is to identify any detrimental effect that would ensue from the grant of the variance. From the use perspective, there is no detrimental impacts. And the applicant, in response to community concerns, has relocated the construction entrance to the midpoint of the site's southern perimeter directly along Route 66, which would eliminate impacts to Cedar Village Boulevard and Freehold Road during construction. The main concern that we've heard from the community is in connection to the height of the structure. The height of the structure at 54 feet consists of 4 floors totaling 50 feet with a 4-foot tall decorative parapet. The proposed configuration actually addresses a number of concerns from the community as well from an operational standpoint. Early on in this process, the applicant reached out to township members or township leadership and asked to discuss it. And their concerns a lot dealt with lot coverage and stormwater. So going up to a 4-story instead of an expanded 3-story decreases lot coverage, which in turn allows a lot of the wooded areas acting as buffer to remain intact. The stormwater will also be maintained on site and discharged obviously through a separate system than those of Nobility Crest and Cedar Village. And as we heard from Mr. Scalo, permitting the height means a lessening of the distance for the units for the residents, which allows them better mobility to access central amenities. The building itself is well under lot coverage, so that wasn't the main driving force for going to 4 stories. It was the actual operations and ensuring that buffering remained intact. So in order to address this, and this brings us to number 3, study whether the detrimental effect could be mitigated by imposing reasonable conditions. So in order to mitigate the effect of the height, the applicant is reducing the elevation of the lot of the parcel in this area from 139 to 110. This will in effect sink the proposed building and site improvements and create the natural berm as discussed before. Building, as demonstrated by the video presented, the proposed structure will therefore have the impact of a 3-story structure, which is permitted within the zone in connection with senior citizen apartments. The proposed building will appear roughly equivalent in height to Nobility Crest. The applicant will also provide landscaping around the perimeter of the parking area and to supplement areas of existing vegetation where needed. As a result, and as demonstrated by the video, the proposed building will generally not be visible from Cedar Village or Nobility Crest. That brings us to our final criteria, which is to weigh the positive against the negative criteria. With respect to the negative criteria, the community must look to see if any detriments are substantial enough to outweigh the benefits of an inherently beneficial use. As testified by the applicant's other experts, there is more than enough parking on site. Stormwater will be managed and stored underground and on site and will not impact surrounding developments, and the traffic generated will not substantially impact existing patterns. The applicant has proposed to mitigate the proposed height via the reduced grading and natural buffering and additional buffering. And what is proposed with the height is a better zoning alternative than a lower building with a larger footprint. With respect to bulk standards, Mr. Higgins has stated, and BPC, and I concur, that any required bulk variances are subsumed within the use variance.
Before you go to your conclusion, Ms. Allen, I just want to talk about the relative finished floor areas of our proposed facility and what Nobility Crest has. If I tell you that, and I think you've already covered in part, that our finished floor level is going to be 110 and Nobility Crest finished floor level is 131, or 21 feet higher than our finished floor level, even though we're at 4 stories. Do you feel that that is a truly adequate, sufficient, and thorough mitigation of the height issue?
Yes. Particularly as, even though the building and site improvements will be essentially lowered, the existing buffering around will remain intact in that grading. So it acts as a natural buffer as well, or a berm.
Okay, and just to go back for a second, earlier on, where you were citing not only the master plan, but I believe you were citing a report on future planning in the township. I'm just looking on my notes here. I think you were citing from the Community Facilities and Recreation Plan, but you were also citing from the November 30, 2000 reexamination report. Now, are these reports that have been compiled in accordance with either state law or state regulation for the township to assess what it needs to do in the land planning area? Is that where these things come from?
Yes, and they help guide the community into how it sees its future and how it wants to develop.
Okay, so when we talk about making available options for senior living, that was something that was discussed in the forward planning reports of this township, even though the township had not made any kind of allocation for assisted living or memory care or rehabilitation or long-term care. The idea of taking care of senior citizens, an aging and vulnerable population, that was well established, was it not?
It was, and I would note that the current uses, or the proposed use, is, as was testified by Mr. Scalo, is relatively new in the fact that it consolidates so many services into one structure.
So what relationship, if you can just tie it for me together, does your citing the master plan and the community facilities plan and November 30, 2000 reexamination report, seeing what their goals were and relating them to our project, what does that have to do with the concept of inherently beneficial?
So inherently beneficial is recognized as something that helps the entire community and the neighborhood. It's seen as an overriding good use. And so in this instance, this use is tying into the master plan and the planning documents of the community in a manner in which it is promoting the goals of it and also promoting an inherently beneficial use, or permitting an inherently beneficial use.
Would it be fair to say, in your estimation, that because we are working to fulfill these forward-looking goals that were previously established, that in essence, we are fulfilling a good portion of that forward-thinking plan? Is that true?
Yes, no, it's right on point with how the community was looking to service this segment of the population.
So we are fundamentally serving the public good, and we're promoting the general welfare. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
I think you have a conclusion you want to reach, and I'll allow you to do that.
I believe my conclusion was that the proposed use substantially outweighs any detriments associated with the development as proposed, and that it meets all the statutory criteria of a use variance for an inherently beneficial use.
Now, just for completeness purposes, we have also asked for certain bulk variances, but I think Mr. Higgins has talked about it. We were using senior housing as our standard to determine what our deviation would be for the bulk variances. Is there a relationship between the use variance and the bulk variances that we would otherwise have to seek?
The majority of the bulk variances sought would be subsumed within the use variance. As was noted in Price v. Himeji. Mr. Higgins noted that there were some variances that were outside that were standard for all uses. In this instance, it would be the soil removal, which is proposed in order to lower the building. And any use going into this site would have to do at least some grading in order to get to a level surface. Parking was also discussed. And as was testified to, there is sufficient parking on site for the proposed operation. Township's ordinances do not anticipate this use, therefore they could not anticipate the type of parking requirements associated for same. The applicant has worked with Mr. Scalo and has determined what is a typical need or parking that is more than appropriate to address what they anticipate their staffing levels to be. We've discussed the height of the building at length. I believe that addresses the majority of bulk variances. Mr.
Let me just ask you, the analysis for those bulk variances that may be outside the scope of the use variance that we seek and may not be considered subsumed in that use variance, and I think you delineated 2 or 3 of them just now, the soil removal, the fence height, parking, and the height of the building. Well, I guess the height of the building would be part of our use, but what would be the analysis on bulk variances that might be deemed to be outside of our use variance, and therefore?
So these would be covered under the C2 criteria, which is typically addressed as the balance test as the positive and negative. So the positive is permitting the use, an inherently beneficial use, to go forward, and in a manner that is that enhances its operations with respect to the height of the building. And with respect to parking, it permits sufficient parking based on the anticipated generation of employees and visitors, but doesn't overload the parcel in a manner which would increase lot coverage or create unnecessary impervious surfaces. Soil removal, as I discussed, would be anticipated with no matter the project go into the site. Yes, we are requesting a large decrease in elevation, but it will help mask or mitigate the height of the building. And will create, as I said before, a berm around it. With respect to fence height, I believe this was the fence height associated with the fence proximate to a retaining wall.
Right, that it is.
And so you of course want fencing proximate to there in order to mitigate any safety hazards.
So do you see from any of the bulk variances that we are requesting that may be deemed outside of our use variant, do you see any substantial detriment flowing from any of those bulk variance requests?
No, particularly as we're now utilizing a separate construction entrance instead of using any of the adjoining roadways.
And do you see anything that we're asking that would undermine the intent and purpose of the master plan?
No, I believe the use is promoting it.
So from a planning analysis, zoning analysis, understanding the precedents you've been citing, is there any negative criteria that has not been substantially offset or perhaps even eliminated by our proposal that would interfere with us getting a use variance or the bulk variances?
No.
Madam Chair, I believe that I've covered everything in my direct testimony with Ms. Allen, and I will make her available at this point for questions by the board.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board?
Madam Chair, can I just ask one question first? I need a clarification on something, and I think it's very important.
Okay.
Okay. Barbara, I'm trying to understand your testimony as far as the site. It's in the 0120 zone, and senior citizen apartments are permitted on certain sites within the zone, but not specifically on this site. Is that what your testimony is?
It was my understanding that it was in the planned adult community overlay portion.
Planned adult community overlay, yeah, which is single family housing. Yeah, okay, I just wanted to get clarification there. Yeah, because it's not zoned for senior apartments.
No, but it does adjoin.
Yes, I just wanted to get the clarification.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other board members with questions? Okay, we will now ask questions from the public? And I'm not seeing anyone.
I think Marvin Golden.
Oh, I'm sorry. Marvin Golden in your Cedar Village. Okay.
Ms. Allen, is there any particular reason why you left out the additional height of the ventilation system, which I recall is 5 or 6 feet greater than the building height?
I did mention that there's a 5-foot parapet that would be installed to help screen any mechanical equipment.
Yes, but that doesn't cover the height of the ventilation system from various angles.
Typically, I'd have to review Ocean Township's specific ordinances, but there are exclusions sometimes for mechanical equipment, like elevator shaft items, because they don't take up they don't expand the full height of the building. So they don't necessarily increase the height of the structure throughout.
Mr. Gold, I think we've established in this case, and Mr. Higgins can correct me if I'm wrong, that under the Ocean Township approach, this ventilation equipment that you're talking about and the screening is not considered part of building height. If I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected, but that's my understanding.
I don't recall that at all, Mr. Donner.
That is the case in the ordinance. Those mechanicals are exempted from the building height requirement.
Was that not brought up at the last meeting and it was going to be looked into?
Not that I'm aware of.
I just recently listened to the last meeting. I think it ended with the total height actually was including those parapets, and that's kind of why it stopped looking at that.
Then I stand corrected. It's my understanding that they weren't, but.
Yeah, I believe you all discussed at the last meeting in May that whether or not the equipment would be included in that height, and then remember that the parapets were included in that height. So that was why that number was.
Yeah, you're right. The parapets are, the equipment isn't, but the parapets are. You're right. You're right.
So it's the same number either way.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Golden, do you have another question?
I don't.
Okay. Mark's iPhone. I see a hand raised. If you can indicate if you're with Cedar Village or Mobility Press.
I am with Nobility Crest.
Okay, I believe you have to, yes, go through Mr., send your question to Mr. Gazarovski.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other, John, Cedar Village? You can please state your name. John, are you there? If you're muted, if you can hear me.
Audio.
Okay, I can hear you now, John. If you can just please state your
Okay.
name.
I'm online. Ms. Allen, you had mentioned that everything was done to protect the sight lines of the assisted living facility from offending both neighbors on either side, Cedar Village and Nobility Crest. But actually, my question here is to Mr. Donner, and it has to do with the fact, in the same light as I just mentioned, to the appearance of the building. You first of all, it's the first time you really got into mentioning the fact that there was a settlement agreement between Seaview Corporate Park and Cedar Village at Ocean. That settlement agreement has been circulated to all members of Cedar Village on 2 occasions, so everybody in the community knows what is in there. My question to you is this, Mr. Donner. Did you present to the Cedar Village Homeowners Association through their attorney that you were going to lower the level of the building to the effect that 150 cubic feet of soil would need to be removed.
Well, I think you're talking about the number that was used earlier, 150,000.
50,000, I'm sorry, 150.
And sir, I don't believe that's an accurate number. And the reason I don't believe it is that our property, although it's at 139, is not uniformly at 139. There are peaks and valleys, even as it exists right now. So if somebody's trying to say, okay, we're clearing it out of a certain couple of acre area or 3 or 4 acre area and going from 139 to 110 and multiplying that out, that's an inaccurate way to do it because it's not a steady, solid elevation of 139. My understanding that it's quite a bit less than that. I can't give you a number. We did have testimony about that number earlier on, I believe, but it will take a number of months, especially if we limit the amount of hours that we work each day to bring this property down to the right level. But no matter what is built on this property, it's going to take that excavation. Okay, that's the nature of the property. So that's not necessarily, indigenous to our proposal. Somehow, some way, that property has got to be used beneficially. Otherwise, it's going to be zoned into inutility. And I don't think that's a permissible end, even under New Jersey law. Putting that off to the side, whoever builds in that property is going to have to even out that building envelope.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object to Mr. Donner testifying. I mean, he's not an engineer, he's not an architect, he's not an environmentalist. He's giving testimony. He's nothing more than presenting perhaps an unfounded closing argument.
I was asked a question, Mr. Gazarovski, and I responded fairly.
Mr. Steinberg, I believe you're
Yes,
going to address.
My only reason for bringing it up was, was that known before the signing of the agreement between both parties?
I
Whether
think
it was 139,000 or 150,000.
well, let me first of all, John, what's your last name for the record?
Dunnell, Dunnell.
Thank you. And Mr. Donner, were the plans shown to the board and to the attorney who was
absolutely
negotiating the settlement with you?
Not only were the plans shown, we made a 4-hour presentation to the entire board at Cedar Village with their professionals in place. It was absolutely known, which is why Cedar Village did not want us to use Cedar Village Boulevard for our construction access. So it was absolutely known.
I think that answers the question. Do you have some more?
That is correct. I was just wondering if the amount of removal was mentioned at that time, but obviously it was not. That's all I had. Thank you.
Well, the plan was shown, so you tell off the plan what had to be removed. The elevations are shown on the plan. So you can't say it wasn't said because the elevations were on the plan and were given to the professionals of Cedar Village.
Yeah, I thought that the original one was a different one than the one that was finally
not on elevation
today.
reduction. Not on elevation reduction. That's been solid throughout.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I see Ken from Cedar Village. Ken, if you don't mind just stating your last name.
Yes, it's, excuse me, it's Ken Laposa. I'm 25 Boxwood Drive, Cedar Village. My question also goes to Mr. Donner. Sir,
Mr. Donner is not here to
I
answer
understand
questions
that. I
at this
understand,
time.
but it's
You
a
need to,
general-
this is cross-examination of the plan.
It's a general question, and whoever wants to answer it may answer it then. Okay.
It's specific to the witness at hand.
Okay, then the witness at hand. Okay, we're taking all this dirt out, and we're going to be lowering that property. Excuse me, and we have this this monstrosity of a road coming out onto 66. Who, and how is it going to be set so that we are not inconvenienced at all when we come out and make our right turn? Is there going to be a light there? Is there going to be a stop sign? What?
This would be a question for the traffic engineer who's already testified.
I don't see how it's a question for the traffic engineer, since this was proposed to us after the traffic engineer decided to tell us about how the traffic will be planned and all.
It should have been asked of Mr. Best. She could have addressed it, but I
Just
think
came
the
out.
short answer is we're going to have to meet standards of the DOT. We're at the very beginning here. So whatever the DOT requires, we're going to have to meet.
So then in other words, I can assume that we will not be inconvenienced at all, correct?
I don't see how you're going to be inconvenienced, but you know, I don't want to make a broad statement, but we did say that where the DOT minimum standard was 100 feet curb line, we're 167 feet. So we're quite a bit further distance than what the DOT would require. And we have positioned this with the intent of making sure that neither Cedar Village nor Nobility Crest are inconvenienced. So let me say that, that's our intent.
Your intent doesn't mean it'll happen.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Falva.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Barbara, may I call you Barbara since we've,
Of course, Peter.
okay. With regard to the need to satisfy the senior housing, did you do an assessment of what the Ocean Township has actually constructed since the time of the plan being adopted?
I have not done a site-by-site analysis, but I do note that the proposed use is not permitted anywhere within the township and has not been constructed. And there has been a noted demand for it.
Have you done an assessment of the number of assisted living, memory care units, and rehabilitation nursing facilities within a 5-mile radius?
No, that testimony was provided by Mr. Scalo. I do know I believe there was a 16-bed, I believe it was a, not assisted living, long-term care facility in Ocean Township, but I believe it's limited to that.
Actually, memory care.
Memory care.
It's diagonally across the highway from this property. That's one. Aware of rehabilitation facilities? For example, Jersey Shore Rehabilitation on Route 33 in Neptune by the Route 18 exit. 8A.
The inherently beneficial use is not solely dependent on whether there's another one nearby. There is a demand in the area, as was testified to by Mr. Scalo. So, and rehabilitation isn't the only use proposed here. As was previously testified, there's assisted living, there's rehabilitation, there's long-term care, and there's memory care.
How about a Nora Care on West Park Avenue?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
There's a facility on West Park Avenue called the Nora Care. That's in Ocean Township.
And there's still demand.
It's a demand for everything.
Okay, Mr. Falvo, any other questions?
No, that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, Bill Commons, and if you
Yes.
can just indicate if you're with.
I have a procedure question. I'm from Nobility Crest. Mr. Steinberg, you got to really straighten something out for me, because what I understand, Cedar Village took a payout and they're not supposed to be talking, but you're allowing them.
No one said they can't be talking.
I thought you said that they're represented by their attorney and they took money.
Their attorney withdrew. They do not have an attorney representing them.
So we're supposed to email Mr. Gazarovski now and have him ask our questions. What if we don't have the capability of emailing questions to him now? We're going to get shut out. We've been shut out too long with this whole thing here. We have to be heard. Ms. Krimko told you were out of line with this. So
I heard what she said.
Straighten this stuff out.
I have asked for certain documentation to make a decision.
Now, I got questions for the first fella there.
Well, he's not before you. He's not before you right now. We do have a procedural requirement that we go in order.
Am I going to be able to speak to him at the next meeting?
After I see the documentation from the board and see how they engaged Mr. Gazarovski and what type of resolution they have determined in hiring him and what his engagement consists of, I'll make a decision.
Yeah, but why didn't you get that beforehand? Why so long?
He will then be I haven't seen any of those items so far, number one. Number two, Mr. Gazarovski will be up next. I don't know if we're going to get to it tonight, and he will be asking all the questions of these witnesses. If after that, I determine that people from Nobility Crest have the opportunity to ask questions, all of those witnesses will be available to ask questions of.
Which won't be tonight because as you see, the participants have dropped. People are going to bed and this is enough with this.
I can't help that. Okay,
Okay.
I'm still here.
All right,
And
yeah, me too.
our board
I've
is
been
still here.
Every meeting so far, and it's ridiculous that you guys don't know what you're doing.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Com, I will have to object to that because the board is giving their time. I can certainly understand that there may be frustrations, but I can assure you, not that I don't personally want to be of service to my community, but it's 9:45 and I'm here and I think I know what I'm doing. And
I'm
if
not-
I
I'm
don't,
not
I
talking-
defer to Mr. Steinberg. So I would just ask for everyone to just please be respectful.
Oh, no, I apologize, Ms. Beal, but I agree. The board has been very good. They've asked nice questions and important questions, but the attorneys seem to be taking all this, you know, the Steinberg and Donner, and Grabowski hasn't spoke, and then Falvo. So it seems like a lawyer go around here. You know, the committee has asked good questions, and I want to follow up on what the committee asks. Thank you
Understood.
very much. Sorry about my aggravation, but I'm aggravated.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, Mr. Donner.
Well, I'm not going to close my case tonight. I'm going to leave it open. But I have no more witnesses. It's 10, almost 10 o'clock. I would like to talk about where we're going to go from here in terms of, I guess, preserving notice to the public as to what's going to happen. But what we've been doing is we've been making announcements at the next regular zoning board meeting. And before that meeting, I will let you know whether my client will pay for another special meeting. Okay, unless Mr. Gazarovski.
Mr. Donner, I can not promise another special meeting to a board of volunteers that has been reeling with special meetings over the past 6 months. So I don't want to make anything more than us moving this to the, I think the August 18 meeting as a placeholding, but it's very difficult for volunteers to continue to show up to 2 meetings when they signed up for one. You know, a month.
I understand that. And I really thank the board.
Especially when it comes to them trying to get some beneficial time with their families.
Very grateful to the board.
Yeah, we'll try to figure something out, but to decide at this hour on Zoom, it'll
Well,
probably
we
be impossible.
figured out enough that we're going to go to at least the August 18th meeting, and as a placeholder, at least, maybe we'll have some proceedings that night. We'll see. I have to talk to Mr. Gazarovski.
All the meetings moving forward from this meeting on will be in person.
So can we make an announcement tonight that it is in
Yes.
person and the next meeting date is August 18th, 2022?
Yes,
So I don't have to give another 400 notices out?
correct.
And yes.
Mr.
Mr.
So
Gazarovski.
Yeah, briefly. I don't have a problem with any of that, but obviously my secretaries have gone. And I think I may have a hearing on August the 18th, but I will check the first thing in the morning and contact Mr. Steinberg and Mr. Donner.
No, you won't, Mr. Gazarovski, because the first thing in the morning you have a previous date tomorrow morning. So please don't lie to the board. We can wait until Monday or Wednesday or next Friday.
This tomorrow is probably more important than my first prom date, right?
I would think so. I would think so, sir. Okay.
I would suggest, Mr. Donner, you're concluded for this evening.
Yes, I am. I'm leaving my case open for now.
Of course, and it wouldn't be beneficial for anybody to start opposition at this time. because of the lateness of the hour, and plus you haven't finished your presentation or haven't decided to finish your presentation. I would suggest, Shawanda, that this matter be carried to the meeting of our regular meeting of August 18th, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. There is no further notice required and no publication. We're just carrying it. It will be in person at the municipal building. 399?
Yes.
399 Monmouth Road.
Yes.
In Oakhurst. There won't be another notification. But for the public, they can continuously check the website, because if Mr. Donner or Mr. Gazarovski is not available, they may want to carry it to a different time, or possibly we can figure out something else. So, but for this juncture, it will be announced at that meeting whether or not it will proceed partially at that meeting or be further carried to another meeting.
Thank you.
I got it right, Ron?
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
you
great.
got it.
I
You got it
appreciate
right.
the courtesy.
Mr.
So,
Kirk, would that be available on Zoom too, or in person is only in person?
It will
Only in
Only
person.
in person.
Thank you so much.
We will no longer be doing Zoom at all, right? Is that right, Ron?
Correct.
We're done. Everything is in person.
Are masks required?
No masks are required,
Masks
although
are optional, right?
everyone who would feel comfortable with a mask, please do so. We will do everything we can to accommodate any reasonable request, but we will be having in-person meetings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And
With that, Shawan, you can move to adjourn, I believe.
I
Thank you,
will
board members.
move to
Thank
adjourn.
A
Can we
second.
ask
There
a
a second?
question of the board
Second.
members? Can those from
I'm
Nobility Crest ask a question of the board members?
You're talking about procedural, you never can ask questions of board members. Are you talking about procedural questions?
Yes,
What
You
is
You
it?
can ask the attorney.
Go ahead.
two things. One, you stated that no more Zoom meetings. You're going to have the next meeting, an open meeting at the municipal building. If you saw in the beginning, there was 103 participants. Is there going to be enough room for 103 people to come into the municipal building? You know, making this,
At this point in time, it's only to hold their place so they don't have to notice. Okay? So I don't have an answer for you. I understand your trepidation. We can accommodate 100 people, certainly, in that venue.
okay, and then I would ask the board to please take a ride into Cedar Village and just look where they're going to have, not
Okay,
the
sir,
construction
sir,
zone, but
that's
the main
now that-
road.
That's not
Now that's
no,
that's
it's not
inappropriate.
procedural.
That's
Yeah, all right,
inappropriate.
you cut us out of everything.
No, we are open and transparent.
Oh, open and
No,
transparent.
we can't, open and transparent, till we can't ask a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, you got me because I saw the thing light up. Please, can we ask the fire department, do they have?
You're
facility-
no, whoa. The fire department is contacted before any application goes forward and provides a report.
I'm talking about a 4-story building. Do they have?
I'm saying that
4-story building?
every application goes to the Fire Bureau for review, and they
So
provide a report, and it's part of the package.
You know that they have something for a 4-story building then?
I know that they wrote a report for a 4-story building on what they thought of it.
Oh, so you have to buy them a fire truck probably?
You're way
First
out
of all,
line.
Ron, we're getting into a back and forth. I don't even know who this gentleman is. What is your name for the record?
My name is Mark Arbolino. I live in Ocean Township in Isle Avenue. My mother lives here.
Okay, there is a report.
I'm just
There's
here
a
for-
report. If you let me finish, there's a report on file with the application or with all the documents that were sent out to the different agencies. It's available at Town Hall for you to review.
So you know that all you people that are talking that know everything say that there's a ladder to go up to a 4-story building.
Okay,
Are you
okay.
saying that?
Okay, they're not answering. The fire department has made a report. That report's
you-
available.
So you
You
don't
can
know.
certainly,
You
you
don't
can
know.
certainly comment at the hearing when the public is invited to comment and
So
give their
all you
opinion.
people, all
Okay,
you people up
okay.
here
Thank
don't
you.
know.
Madam Chair,
I think that
I'd like
I
to
made a
end the meeting.
motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
close.
Second.
There's a second
Second.
or close.
Second.
So you don't even know. All in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank you,
very good
everyone, for your
evening,
time.
Thank
and
board members.
Really,
Take care, everybody.
thank
Good
you very
night.
much.
Here, guys.
Yeah.